Good evening. I'll call the February 17th Select Board meeting to order. I'm just going to open the meeting and we'll go over to the county meeting, which I'll pass over to Christy Parentella. Of course, I left my script over at my house again, but I will open the meeting by just confirming that all members are present and can hear me. Jason Bridges.
Here.
Christy Parentella.
Here.
Melissa Murphy.
Here.
Matt Fee.
Here.
Town staff members. Andrew Vorse. Libby Gibson.
Here.
Present.
Amy Baxter.
Here.
Ryan Turbett.
Present.
Erica Mooney.
Present.
Jeff Carlson.
Here.
Tucker Holland.
Present.
Rob McNeil.
Here.
Vincent Murphy.
Here.
Tom Rafter.
Here.
And then we also have with us from Town Council, John Giorgio.
Here.
Marsh.
Here.
And then the other names I see on my screen are Amy Young.
Amy Young is with the Beat.
Stanton,
And Tom Stanton is with Verizon.
Paul Santos.
Here.
Jay Maroney.
And Jay is here for Bar Sushi.
And thank you. And Tim Lyford.
And Tim is on from National Grid.
Okay.
That's correct. Yep.
Thank you. So we are meeting remotely consistent with Governor Baker's orders in regard to the COVID-19 pandemic, where we've been advised and encouraged to meet entirely remotely, and the open meeting law requirements have been waived. We do have public access through the Zoom webinar where people can sign up as an attendee and they can raise their hand if they wish to speak at the appropriate time in the agenda. As we go through the agendas, we announce as chair items, hand it over to the appropriate person to speak, and then people can raise their hands and ask questions or make comments at that time. And I will call on you. We will be taking all of our votes by a roll call. And I think that generally covers where we're at. So I will turn it over to Christy Parentella to do our county meeting.
Thank you, Dawn. I will now call to order the County Commissioners meeting of February 17th, 2021 at 5:03 p.m. Announcements. The County Commissioner meeting is being audio and video recorded. I will now open it up for public comment for County Commissioners for anything not on our agenda. I'm not seeing any hands. But if you have any comments for the County Commissioner, feel free to raise your hand and we can come back to you. There's no new business, so I will move to approval of minutes and warrants. Are there any questions about the minutes, payroll, or treasury warrants?
Move approval.
By roll call vote, Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Don Holgate,
Aye.
Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Christy Parentella, aye. That passes unanimously. The next item on our agenda is official business update regarding Sheep Pond Road erosion and alternative access. And I will turn this over to Libby Gibson.
Thank you. Did you do the, was the minutes and warrants all one motion?
Matt, was that one motion?
Yes, it was.
Okay, thank you. All right, so Sheep Pond Road, alternative access. I'm just gonna give a very brief overview of what's happened and what we are, steps we're taking to deal with it. Sheep Pond Road suffered some erosion about 3 weeks ago, maybe, and it caused a partial collapse of the road, making it impassable to vehicular traffic at that point. We actually have been working on trying to develop an alternative access in that exact area for over a year. However, our efforts did stall a bit with COVID-related delays. Rob McNeil, the DPW director, is going to give us an overview of the erosion and a map of our temporary access proposal with some review of what it entails and what the timing is. And Vicki Marsh, our real estate counsel, will review the documents that will need to be approved by the county commissioners in order to move this temporary access forward. We met with the property owners in the area last Friday and reviewed with them the temporary access proposal, as well as some more long-term fixes. And we are meeting with them again the week of March 1st to further those discussions. Pretty much any of our measures will involve traveling over private property. So we will need either voluntary easements or some kind of taking measure. So Rob, I think we go to you.
Can you confirm that you can see the screen?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to walk through some quick slides. This is how the site of the failure looked the night before, the afternoon before, Monday, February 1st. And this is the morning after. Basically, we lost about 30 feet overnight. This is looking west. This is the same photograph looking east, just showing Sheep Pond at the point. Here's an overview, and the point that we were just looking at is this section here. This is the extension of Massasoit Bridge over a Long Pond is just off the map here. This turns into Red Barn Road, and ultimately Sheep Pond Road comes down. So that right now, this is this section here at the bottom that's been washed out, which has isolated all the homes from that point forward all the way to the end. So this is head of the plains that has a few houses off here, and then these two at the end. And there's a disconnect currently at the end over here. So initially we had our surveyor look at this end of head of the plains area, and this is the end of the public way for Sheep Pond with some looking at existing easements and access rights, et cetera, to really take a look at the best means to do this. And the team, after looking at this, came up with a couple access alternatives, one being the shortest stretch off of head of the plains, parallel to an existing driveway up here that would access Sheep Pond through this yellow easement area over this way. The second was access option 2, which was essentially running west to east to an existing improved driveway location along this old way to make a similar connection. In the end, the team discussed it, and with input from the neighbors, we developed this most recent plan, which is option 1A and 1B. 1A is what we're really focused on tonight, which is the temporary construction of about 150 feet of connection between the last driveway and the easement section of Sheep Pond right here, which will, if constructed according to plan, and we'll see that next, will allow for not just access, but access for emergency vehicles as well. This other option 1B is something that the town will continue to pursue to provide a more permanent solution, which would be around the homes here, consistent with what the kind of tactic it has taken previously in this location behind the homes, and ultimately would allow for the temporary access being allowed or being proposed by the neighbors here to be closed up again. So the plan that's currently proposed, this is head of the plains coming down. And this is a property plan, so it doesn't show as much detail as some of the other plans do, but the driveway is 2 parallel lines coming in this way that flare up, come down this way. This driveway serves this house. The driveway continues over this existing easement and serves this house in here. So there's a combination of access, and then this highlighted area is where construction would be necessary from the driveway to this sheep pond access here, and the flare on the road proposed there. The flare here would allow for the turning radius of the emergency vehicles onto sheep pond. And this is just the highlighted section of that same process, just highlighting the different players involved. Right now, 1 is shared by all people that have access. 2 and 5 are Conservation Foundation. 3 is 9 Hop LLC, and 4 is Ed and Maria Cianava. This is from the sheep pond access area, looking up to the end of, or the turn of Mr. Cianava's driveway. And this is ultimately the area that would be needed to be constructed. The plan is to sort of hold the line of disturbance. This is currently where the driveway flares into his yard. There's a split rail at the top, a split rail at the bottom, and right now just pedestrian access. This would be the 150 feet, essentially 10 feet wide with a flare at the end. From that same location, looking due east down the existing access sheep pond. And then looking back up that way without the drafts lines on there, looking back up. And then from the top, looking back down. So the flare, the driveway flare to its house, to Ed's house is over here. This is basically where the construction would occur down to the sheep pond location. And that's it. Happy to go back to any of those if you have particular questions.
Thank you, Rob. So Vicky, I think, is going to review with us what sort of documents are and approvals are needed here, as well as I think we are seeking to get some board approval, at least conceptually, of those documents to be prepared and executed. Unless there are, and they would just go ahead and that would happen unless material changes would need to be made after tonight. And those documents, I believe, Vicky, you can comment, have been sent to the appropriate parties to review and hopefully execute. Do you want to?
Yes. So I have prepared, after we had our meeting last week with the residents that are affected on Head of the Plains, we proceeded to prepare a temporary easement agreement, which would be a voluntary easement granted by the parties on Head of the Plains. So there is one party at the very beginning from off of Massasoit, that's for Head of the Plains Road, the Carlins. So they have one lot up there. And then there is 9 Hop, which is at 9 Head of the Plains, and 11 Head of the Plains is the Cianavas. And then the Nantucket Conservation Foundation owns most of the property that abuts Head of the Plains along between 4 and between 9. So what we were going to do is to get an easement over Head of the Plains from these 4 property owners. They all have easement rights in Head of the Plains by virtue of a private easement agreement amongst them. So in order for the county to be able to use this road, we would have to get their permission and get an easement from them to be able to open this up to the public. And in addition, this particular easement agreement also provides for the private driveway easement for 9 Hop and Cianava and Nantucket Conservation Foundation. So they all have this private agreement, private driveway access as well. There is a gate that is prior to the driveway area, which has been closed or has the right to be closed. And that's just prior to at the end, I believe it's like near the end of the turquoise, right there. So there's a gate there that they have the right to close, and that prevents access from anybody else going down there, except for these particular lot owners. And they have agreed, at least at the meeting last week, they agreed that they would allow that gate to be open while this temporary easement is in place, with the understanding that when the temporary easement is no, that gate could be then closed again. So what we've done is we've gotten I've prepared an access easement that will run all the way from Massasoit Road all the way up over Head of the Plains to the private driveway, and then along the private driveway as well, okay? And that's the access easement that we get in order for the county, the public, our emergency vehicles to be able to go over there. And this will then allow the Sheep Pond Road residents and the public and our emergency vehicles to go down that yellow access. That's a private access easement also for the residents of Sheep Pond to be able to get down to their homes. So that would enable them to be able to get there and for us to be able to service them. And so we have these access easements. And then we have also in this document a construction easement that would go over Lot 5, which is owned by NCF. And that's at the corner. You'll see that, yeah, right there. So that's going to be a construction easement, which will allow the emergency vehicles to be able to get over that corner to make the turn there and go down Sheep Pond Road. So there's that. And then there is also a construction easement that's going to be located in this driveway area that's going to install the 10-foot wide gravel road. And so those are the 2 construction easements as well. The construction, I mean, we will have the right to be able to construct the roadway. We have to get the necessary permits. And so we will have to get approval from Natural Heritage to be able to proceed with the construction out there. And Jeff Carlson is going to help get those permit approvals for us once these parties have agreed to proceed with this project, allow us to proceed with this project. We're also going to be responsible for the maintenance and repair of the access and construction easement areas so that there will be no damage to the properties surrounding it. If there's any debris from our construction, we have to remove it. And then once we're through using this access and construction easement area, if that's ever terminated, then we would have to restore the property as well to its as close to its original condition as reasonably practicable. The termination of the easements I've provided for in here are that in the event that we have arranged for a permanent alternative access for the residents to use, then we could terminate this temporary easement and we would notify the property owners and they would then be able to close their gate and we would record a notice that we're terminating our easement rights. However, we could still try to maintain some access overhead of the plains if we so desire. So we could try to do that to provide us with some other options at a later date in the event that option 1B doesn't, work out. So I think that pretty much covers the easement agreement. In the event that the parties do not voluntarily agree to grant the easements, the county would have the option of doing a taking if we needed to. And if we had to do that, we would have to have appraisals done in order to value the easements that we're taking, as well as we could obviously seek to see if they would waive their damages, but that would be unlikely if they're not going to grant us these easements. And then we would have to have a notice hearings and do the taking. And then there would be an award of damages if they want to claim damages as a result of these takings. In addition, I've prepared a betterment assessment statement, which is an estimated statement that we're required to file at the Registry of Deeds prior to the commencement of the project. And that I generally recommend that we have an estimate that is more on the higher side rather than the lower side, because in the event that once the project is completed, if the amount of the cost is actually higher than our estimate, we're not able to recover those costs. So we've asked for estimates and we've estimated those costs to be $150,000, which is included in the assessment that I've provided presently. And then within 6 months after the completion of the work, we would have to file the actual statement, which would put the betterments on the tax rolls. So I think that's pretty much an outline of the documents. I don't know if any of you have any questions.
I do. It's
Go.
Matt.
Hi, Matt.
Hello, making sure you hear me. Here's a question. Utilities, there's no overhead poles. I assume it's only electric and the electric is all underground.
Mm-hmm.
Does that, will we have the easement for that? And does that currently run down Sheep's Pond?
So there are utility easements on Head of the Plains and on Sheep Pond Road. And those do not run to the county. They are utility easements that are private easements that run to the individuals.
So we don't have to worry about those. Because I look at, one of the things I think about when I look at the option we're doing, I have a feeling that we're going to be back here in a year or two for, the yellow section of that road that Rob showed. And so my inclination is to agree to this tonight. And if we get pushback, then I think we should be doing our, if we have to do a taking, rather than do this, that's going to last us a year or two, let's do a taking on a row or two back that, that solves this for 10 years. So rather than a year or two.
So I think the idea for option 1B is that that would be the more long-term option to prevent that, if that yellow roadway, Sheep's Pond Road, washes away or is partially eroded. By having option 1B, I think that is the way for these residents to get around.
Well, will that get to the two houses kind of in the dead middle? I'm assuming if we ever get to needing that, some of these along the beach will be relocated. But I'm wondering, will option 1B alone get us, I guess, to the middle?
So if you're talking about the two lots that are sort of around the loop there, is that what you're talking about, those two lots there?
There or to the right of them, those two, or the ones, to the right and down?
So those two around the loop, they have an easement from Head of the Plains Road down around that loop. And that's how they can access out. And that gets them all the way out to Massasoit Road, okay? So the other idea would possibly be, if for the other homes that are not too far away, would be to try to connect to that loop, perhaps, and get out that way, which would require easements. And most of the land, I believe, that surrounds those two homes that are near the loop, that's NCF land. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, sort of. I don't have a pointer to be able to show, coming off of option A, you're driving along, all right, there we go, beautiful. You're going by those two houses right there in that area is probably where we're going to have our next breach, if you had to guess. So what happened, if that happens in that area where you had your hand, what happens?
So there are a couple of homes down there too. They would probably go as well. And so the other homes, there's a roadway now that goes by a couple of other homes. If we had option 1B in place, those homes could then go down to option 1B and head out that way.
If I might, Rob, I think was going to comment on this, but Matt, we've been talking about what you're concerned about, the longer term access, and it may end up being that there eventually may have to be two accesses because the homes in the middle might not survive much more erosion in that area, and unless they can move way back, there may not be a need for access there. And you're right, we don't really know exactly where any erosion might specifically occur, but we think that with this temporary option 1A up here, that can buy some sufficient time perhaps for these few homes up in that section. And then down below, more to the north there, or south, I guess that is, the option 1B. It's only under discussion. We need to talk it over with the residents. Did you want to add something, Rob? I thought I saw your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, simply that the resident offering option 1A physical connection to the end of the driveway recognizes that this is a temporary scenario that may play out in various forms through the years going forward. That the primary goal was to provide egress at both ends and seek a more permanent solution as the town has in the past, but recognize that this is, potentially an option going forward, particularly with this temporary easement in place. And I think that the big discussion, Matt, was specific to a lot of the homes being seaward of their access, and the likelihood that as their access disappears, so mostly will be the homes that go along with them. So at some point, shortly before or after this section goes, it's likely that the need for that option 1A would also go along with it.
Yeah, it's Matt again, and I'm fine with that, Rob. I just, if they start to sort of oppose it and we start to have problems, then we should go to, and my suggestion is you go to the long-term access sooner. If we're gonna have to do takings and lawyers and all that stuff, if this can't be done amicably, then let's look at the long-term access. But if it's, I'm hoping it's amicable and we get these two options and we move on.
Are there any other board questions? I see we have a public question. I'm not seeing any board questions. Erica, can you let Cormac Collier in?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me? This is Cormac Collier.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Cormac Collier, President for the Nantucket Conservation Foundation. Vicki, thank you for through you, Madam Chair. Vicki, thank you for sending those documents along today. I just had a further question though, and perhaps in addition to the documents. Rob, if you could pull up the map with the yellow on it. Thank you. Vicki, it's my understanding that the yellow is an easement agreement. It's a private easement that only benefits the last 5 owners to the west. So I think you're going to need to actually have an easement across the yellow as well.
So it does benefit, there are a couple of easement agreements out there, but you're correct. It does benefit just, a few of them. And then there is another easement agreement, however, that benefits some additional owners.
So would would we have to do another easement that would benefit the town and the entire Sheep Pond Road homeowners?
We may have to, depending upon, I haven't done the title research to see us down further. So I would have to go and take a look at that to just see how far down we would need to go. So we may need to, but for the time being, this will at least get us what we need.
Okay, no problem. So just a question for you and Whit, I guess, to work out.
Right. No, I'm happy to work with, with Whit. And I think, the big thing is for us to at least be able to get some access for these people up and around. And so the only lots, lot 5 that NCF has is just going to have a very small construction easement on the corner for you. We've tried to make it as small as possible, but still allow for the emergency vehicles. So, yeah.
Okay, I'm just wondering if, again, just we'll talk about it in the coming.
Yeah, no,
if there's another agreement that's easement that's necessary after you get after that little turn that will go over the yellow to the red, which is actually where the red starts, is the official end
of the
road.
Yeah. So that, we would need to look into whether we're going to need additional easements, that would involve NCF as well, obviously in this. But for the time being, we really want to focus on what we need to do to get the initial temporary easements in place.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Cormac. Are there any other questions from the board? I'm not seeing any. I had a question, Vicki. What is the timeline of 1A and 1B? How quickly will these be put into place?
I'm going to defer to Rob on that, perhaps, as far as construction goes. I can tell you, though, that as far as just doing, if you're talking about documents, once we come to an agreement with all of the parties, we can have a document executed and recorded fairly quickly, and then we can get National Heritage to issue us a permit, and they can go ahead and start construction. But if we have to go ahead and go through a series of negotiations and then have to do any takings. That could, it's going to take a little bit longer, which is the reason that we really would prefer to have voluntary grants of easements, if at all possible. And then I defer to Rob as far as the construction timeline.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The expected schedule for the 1A, the 150 feet, 10-foot wide, is about it's expected to be a 1-day construction. So we've provided for 2 days. The idea is that we get this constructed prior to the nesting of the species that are protected out there. And that's going to require expedient turnaround of the permit from Natural Heritage. I believe now that we're moving forward with the documentation for the easements, once that has been executed, we submit the permit with the people's signatures on it, indicating that that we do have the easement to go forward with this. We get the permit to construct and get it turned around. And this is expected to be done before the middle of March. The 1B piece is something that we are just beginning to fully investigate. And once we have a plan and accompanying easement documentation, we'll follow a similar process.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands. Libby, do you need, oh, we just actually have a public hand. Deanne Atherton.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Just 3 quick questions. One is just so that the public understands, the town is obligated to provide access to these homes. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Then 2, could you just explain to us what a betterment is?
So I assume you're asking me, Vicki Marsh. So a betterment is an assessment for the costs that the town, or in this case, the county, has incurred in making a public improvement. So it can be a street that's laid out. It can be a way. In this case, it's, they're more ways than they are an actual street that's being laid out here. But those costs for those public improvements can be assessed against the property owners who have a greater benefit or advantage as a result of these improvements than the ordinary person residing in the town or county. And those are imposed on, and those betterments are assessed, and they're put on the tax bills by the assessors.
For those property owners, but not for the general taxpayers.
That's correct. It's for only the property owners who receive a benefit or an advantage greater than the average resident. There's something specific to them receiving these public improvements, the benefit that they receive from them.
Thank you. And then just my last comment is, just as one citizen, I'd like to thank Cormac and the Conservation Foundation for their help in making all this possible. I don't know what options we've had if they weren't there. So thank you, Conservation Foundation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Of course. Thank you, Dan. I see another public hand, Burton Balkine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I had a quick question about access. Will the public be allowed to access either the 1A or 1B? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Vicki or Rob?
The public will be able to access, well, we haven't talked about 1B yet really as far as the access that will be available. But as far as the access on 1A, yes, the public will have access over that road. We need to get our emergency vehicles down, be able to have access for the emergency vehicles, as well as to the residents and the people that service them.
Thank you. Libby, do you need a motion from the board in support of this?
Vicky, what would you suggest for board approval? Because I think what the idea is to get approval for these documents to be executed so we don't have to come back unless there is some kind of material issue. So is there a way you could fashion a motion to that effect?
Certainly. So move that the county commissioners approve of the temporary easement agreement and road betterment assessment statement in substantial and any changes that will be made that are not substantial in nature to these documents. I think that will cover it.
I'll move approval.
Second.
By roll call vote, Matt Fee,
Aye.
Don Holgate,
Aye.
Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella, aye. That passes unanimously. Thank you, Vicky and Rob. The next item on our agenda is commissioners' reports or comments. Seeing none. Next item is adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
By roll call vote, Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Don Holgate,
Aye.
Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella, aye. That passes unanimously, and I will pass it back to you, Don.
Thank you, Christy. So I will begin the select board meeting at 5:42. We have a couple of changes to the agenda. Under announcements, we will have a fourth announcement that I will turn to Christy for. We will be adding under our COVID-19 weekly update some discussion on potential outdoor dining options for this summer and any road or sidewalk closures. And under real estate items, number 4 is going to be tabled, I think, until the meeting on the 3rd, but Erica can correct me on, or I see Ken shaking his head. Okay, so that will be moved to the 3rd. And with that, we will accept the agenda, and I will turn the first announcements over to Libby Gibson.
Thank you. Actually, I'm going to turn
Rob.
the second announcement over to the DPW director, please.
Rob McNeil, would
Sure.
you make the second announcement?
Yeah, thank you. With the support of the select board, with our recent addition of hauling contract to Salvation Army, I'm happy to announce that this coming Sunday, we are going to be hosting our first of many textile reuse and recycling collection events every third Sunday of the month. Going to be held up at the just outside the Take It or Leave It during regular hours, 8 till noon. And during this event, you're invited to drop off reusable clothing, clean and bagged textiles only, please. Shoes, belts, handbags, also ripped, stained, and well-loved textiles welcome. I'll be running this right through at least June, and your participation is greatly encouraged. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Can I ask you while you're on here, when is the next hazardous waste day for people to dispose of paint and other things?
Well, that is a great question, and I don't know off the top of my head, but
Okay, sorry.
I could pull it up on the website in seconds if you bear with me for a moment.
Well, we can go over to the next announcement. Libby, did you want to do that one? And
Sure.
then pass it to Christy?
There is no board meeting next Wednesday, February 24th. The next board meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, March 3rd. And I believe that Christy has an announcement.
Oh, before you go, Christy, Rob?
Thank you, Madam Chair. April 10th is the next event.
Great, thank you.
Hazardous waste event. Thank you.
Christy?
Thank you. I just want to announce that Nantucket Equity Advocates in the Athenaeum are hosting Monday movie discussions with Mo. Richard Mo Moore is an operations manager for the DPW and will host a 3-part series using documentaries to guide a conversation about the history of systemic racism in America. Participants will watch the films on their own prior to the Zoom meetings. And the first Monday movie with Mo is this upcoming Monday, February 22nd at 7 p.m. Future discussions are on the 4th Monday of the month. This month's film is Reconstruction, America After the Civil War, hours 1 and 2. The first 2 hours of the series centers on the pivotal decade following the rebellion, charting Black progress and highlighting the accomplishments of the many political leaders who emerged to usher their communities into the new era of freedom. And registration is live on the Athenaeum's website. I hope many of you will attend. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. Next, we're going to turn to our COVID-19 weekly update. Are there any public comments or board comments to open? Seeing none, we actually, unfortunately, do not have our public health director with us tonight, but I think that the town manager is
Okay,
going
I'm gonna do my best to substitute. It is a poor substitution. Please bear with me, for the public health director and the human services director. Both of them are otherwise occupied with matters that don't allow them to be here. So first off, COVID incidence stats. We've had so far to date 25,598 COVID tests, positive tests 1,176 for a positivity rate of 2.6%, which is pretty not bad. We are continuing on a downward trend. We need to stay the course, as we've been saying, as we move into the next vaccination stage. Tomorrow, group 2 of phase 2 will commence, and that is individuals of 65 years or older and those with 2 or more comorbidities. Presence of variants has now been detected in Massachusetts. The state is developing a surveillance system to screen for the variants, and the BioBot sewage testing continues to suggest a downward trend currently, which we hope will obviously continue as vaccinations are getting well underway. Travel restrictions remain in place. We do advise that travel remains risky before returning to Massachusetts from out of state, unless you meet some kind of exemption. All of this is on the state website. You must either produce a negative COVID test from within the last 72 hours or quarantine for 10 days or until you get a negative test locally. There is a fine of $500 a day for violations of this. And again, these requirements are on the state website. That is basically it.
Thank you, Lorraine. And were we having someone on for the economic task force update?
Yes, so let me just go through that. I believe Karen McCumber is going to come on.
I don't see her on here right now.
She, I think, is an attendee. And
She is. I'll bring her in.
okay. While she's coming on, we've been working on a grant agreement with the Chamber of Commerce for a grant of $153,500 to the Chamber to administer for small business assistance for businesses impacted by COVID. Karen, I think, can go over what the grant criteria is in order for businesses to get a grant. And then after that, I think what we did, Madam Chair, is move the item under the town manager's report, item 1, which was an update on outdoor dining and proposed street closings, to this section. I don't know why it didn't occur to me in developing the agenda to just put it under the COVID update since it's directly related. But Amy can speak to that. Okay, and I see Karen is on.
Hi, Karen, go ahead.
Okay, great, thank you. So we've been discussing having a grant program that will be administered through the Chamber of Commerce. The purpose is to provide grants to Nantucket-based small businesses to ensure their continued contribution towards a strong island economy. Grants will be used by business owners to stabilize or grow as part of their recovery efforts from the economic impact of COVID-19. We're trying to keep the criteria relatively broad, so it will be for businesses that have been established by April 1st of 2019, that they have some kind of demonstrated operating loss due to COVID, a history of positive cash flow prior to the pandemic. Their headquarters or primary operations are here on Nantucket, and they will have clear and realistic measurable plans for use of these funds in 2021. So we will be administering this program through the chamber, not unlike what we have just done in the last quarter with the Rock Solid Grant Fund.
Thank you. Do we need to make any kind of a motion on this?
No,
Okay.
well, you will actually, when you get to pending contracts. It is a pending contract.
Okay. Is Amy Baxter up next?
I think so. Sorry. I didn't know if Karen wanted to say any other updates about the task force, but I guess that's the main one.
Thank you, Karen. Oh, Christy,
Oh.
go ahead.
Just the task force did meet today, so I didn't know if you guys wanted just a few updates. I know that Amy will be walking through outdoor dining, but on February 23rd, next week at noon, small business updates on NCTV 18 is going to air, and we'll be interviewing Amy, Jericho, and Roberto, hopefully all three, to talk about current guidelines and restrictions and policies for businesses. So we hope people will join in, and you'll be able to watch it afterwards on YouTube. And the task force is putting out our first outreach email, and we have a large list of distributions from the INM to Daybreak to the chamber list to the town list to yesterday's island. So we'll be sending out information to businesses to hopefully help them prepare for a successful season. So just a few updates I wanted to put out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy?
Thank you. And to partner off of that, we did have a discussion today with Economic Task Force. They've been great and helpful with structuring how we're going to go about outdoor dining this year. One thing I want to bring up prior to just kind of reviewing this, just based on feedback I've gotten today, is just for folks watching to understand that this is a status update for us to let the board know the status of the applications, the process, some of the legal things behind it, that it's not going to be approved. We still have to go through specific applications, things of that sort. So this is not a moment to dissect every application. We're going to talk about that, what that schedule is. So just that folks understand kind of what this is. This is for me to give you an update as to where we are. So we'll go to presentation in just a minute. I'll just kind of review that. As you know, we were allowed per emergency order by the governor last year to allow for expansion of premises with liquor licenses. Normally that requires a much more complicated process with the state. Governor Baker allowed for that to happen last year with local approval only, which we did, and that was allowed until November the 1st. That was since expanded. He issued order number 50, which allows for the board as a local licensing authority to approve requests for expansion of outdoor table service or extensions of earlier approvals from last year for any period up to and until 60 days after the end of the state of emergency, meaning if somehow the state of emergency gets removed sometime this season, that and plus 60 days, this is allowed, or if it's earlier based on your decision. So that's kind of where we are beginning in January with the task force. We have an open street subgroup, and we also kind of worked on how this would work. We have set a goal to set out the application, which we have, very similar to last year, trying to see what folks needed to open up that would be helpful. We're getting those in right now. and would review with the select board once we've gone through that as far as what the recommendations are for street closures, things in that sort. And that goal is to do that in March in a similar type of public hearing like we normally do. Erica, can you possibly put up the, thank you. And we'll push a page here. I just wanted to review kind of where we were last year so we kind of can remind everybody of where we had closures. First being outside of Nautilus, Cambridge Street was closed down for that portion off of South Water to Easy Street for dining in front of that area. Can we do next? This being in front of Gaslight, past the alley there on North Union, up to Cambridge Street, that benefited Gaslight Restaurant there as well. Next one. We had the long closure that benefited Queequegs in Town in Ventuno, which was certainly much more of an undertaking. They procured getting that covering over the cobblestones to allow for that, because otherwise that would have been very difficult. And I think they actually manufactured those tables that they used as well. So the restaurants put a lot of effort into these as well. And the next one, the other street closure was at Still Dock Street behind the club car that they used there. This required, is something else we'll talk about, this required negotiations and agreement with a private owner. Those parking spaces there are private. That went very well. They're great to work with, so we had to work through that, and it's something that we have to probably do a little bit more detail this year, make sure that we have in place a butter notifications, agreements, and things of that sort to make sure that we're all working together. And we were able to accomplish this last year, and hopefully we'll do something similar this year. Next page. Again, this is just an overview of some of the sidewalk areas that we were able to do. Main Street, Federal, Broad, South Water being the main ones here. Something that we're going to try to tighten up this year too is, we worked with ADA regulations and things of that sort to make sure that we had enough open space for passing, ramps, things of that sort. Stanchions and ropes like you see in this middle picture here too as well. That's something that was brought up as a priority to make sure that we also work with retail stores and others to assist with organizing line queues and things of that sort in these areas. And next shot. If you also recall, something we'll want to discuss and then we're working out what would work best is we had loading zone pickup zones where we changed some signage. We've gotten some feedback on that. We did it probably later in the season. It's obviously in response to more folks doing pickup to go orders, depending on what restrictions are in place at the time. It's something that we will discuss and certainly put up for discussion as well. And we've gotten some good feedback on some things to improve this area. And you can see these are the 6 that we ended up on, making sure that we had covered most of downtown, and they were in existing loading zones that just switched to this after the loading zone expired, so that we didn't really take up any new spaces other than loading zones. Is there a next page? Was that it? Okay, and this is just a highlight of what those areas looked like. They were numbered so that they can be referred to, and were 15-minute zones in various areas near the restaurants. Next. And this is just basic kind of overview of what you will be seeing, what we'll be putting together for you. This was public property last year. The next. And we will be reviewing private property. Everyone will have to fill out the application that just goes over all the different variables in this situation as far as property ownership, agreements, parking, sidewalk space, whatever that is. This again is going to be what you will be reviewing, and that folks are, as we speak, submitting to us right now. And I think that's it. Yeah, those are just more of the list. So we can probably pull this down for now. Okay, great. And so what I wanted to do is just kind of go over that with all of you and allow again for some comment and see what board's thoughts were, if there's anything that you can do to help with direction or anything of that sort. So if there's any questions.
Do we have an idea? I mean, the restaurants are now allowed to have 40% of their interior seating back. What's the next phase? Do you know what the projection is for that by summer?
I wish that would be incredibly helpful. We've been getting asked that question a lot in our discussion today. You know, we discussed other states. Connecticut really kind of opened up a little bit more on gatherings and things of that sort, and they're a little further along in vaccinations. So possibly that's a model. Hopefully, you know, if it goes well, I would expect that we would certainly have spacing again where we have to be 6 feet apart and limited that way. But last summer, we did not have percentage reductions of occupancy. This was the first time that happened, was because of obviously everything that happened over the winter. But again, I can't guess what they're going to go. So we're working on different scenarios. I've asked everyone to lay it out based on, I'll tell you two things, based on the similar setup of 6 feet apart on their tables. And secondly, the rule that expansion into outdoor spaces does not increase your occupancy. If your current listed occupancy is 100 persons, it does not go up if you add 40 seats outdoors. There can only be 100 no matter where it is distributed. So, and we certainly have some comments and feedback from some areas that need to be tweaked and worked on from last year, and we understand that. So that's the basic thing that we're using the setup on, and it'll just have to be adjusted if we are still facing any sort of restrictions. Oops, sorry.
Melissa?
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Amy, thank you. I think this is really great work. I think my only somewhat, directional feedback or some thoughts are, regardless of any potential limitations, we are not out of the woods as we're seeing things be lifted right now. There's too many variables. I think I read in the news today that these next 4 months with the new variants could be worse than what we've previously seen for all of COVID. So I think it's very appropriate for us to be planning very conservatively over these next 6 months. Our president of the United States said that he doesn't expect every person to be fully vaccinated until at the earliest end of July. So of course, that's the heat of our season. And I just think we don't know enough about what things will look like. So we have to adopt policy to give the greatest flexibility for our businesses to be responsive. And just to add to that, there's always going to be the limitation of weather. I think the one way in which the gods smiled on us this past summer was that we had an exceptionally good outdoor weather season, which allowed for some modicum of success and stability in the outdoor dining. We know this, so we can't count on that. And lastly, I think our community and feedback from our year-round community and our seasonal residents and our visitors is that they enjoy this. So again, to be thinking about how we may or may not want to be incorporating these kinds of policy decisions long-term beyond COVID. And actually I said last, but my last thought is that we don't know how long it will take for people to resume quote unquote normal behavior, pre-COVID behavior. I think there's going to be a lot of cautious and conscientious habit forming around, around needing to not knowing how COVID's going to impact us going into the future. So those are just some of my thoughts. I'm very appreciative of your hard work and how we're going to work with neighbors to make this an enjoyable experience for hopefully beyond 2021. Thank you.
Matt, then Christy.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. I couldn't have said the warning any better than you did. We are not out of this, and it's, so yeah, enough said. Like comments, I would love to see less branding. I would love us to follow the HDC guidelines if we can do that. That's one comment. The other is a question for Amy. These are all sort of liquor license businesses. Have we had applications from non-liquor, and what does that look like?
Yes, so thank you. I was just writing that down. When we worked out this plan, we released for the liquor licenses because we have to, obviously, for legal reasons, get that done. But the plan is to expand to common vics with no liquor takeout to understand their needs. We certainly have gotten a few and know that, but very specifically targeted towards them and to retail as well. So the Chamber and the Economic Task Force are assisting with that, and that is part of the plan in the next few weeks as well. Just to understand line queues like we talked about. We've talked about offline as well, and making sure that those all work together, new businesses moving into some areas and making sure that, and I've been, it's been positive that a lot of neighbors are working together already, and that's been helpful, businesses together. So that is absolutely part. I wanted to also say as well that we also welcome comments and feedback. I certainly get a lot, whether it's positive or negative. I just wanted to say licensing at police.nantucket-ma.gov is our main email. And certainly if folks want to pass along some feedback, please do. That'll be helpful, but yes, we will be directing to as many businesses as we can.
Yeah, it's me, Matt again.
Yeah, and then Kristen.
Sorry, my other comment is, I think last year, it was all new. We didn't know it was going to go. We had coverage downtown, sort of, sometimes. Amy was down there a lot and checking. Has the economic group sort of, spoken to the police department and set up so that there will be sort of coverage at our busiest times with people who are there to be helpful, not punitive? Has that all been sort of worked out?
I certainly will be doing that. I want to kind of get all these in. We're going to have probably a couple restaurants that aren't going to be able to open, some that might want some new spaces. So I'm trying to get a hold on what's actually going to happen. But yes, that will be brought in as soon as that we have a better idea of that. Absolutely. Yeah.
And just a quick follow-up, Don. The reason I'm bringing that up is we had issues down on, mainly, down on the strip with some of those that I really think could be worked out. We learned what worked and what didn't. And I just think it would be great to have that in place for those guys right from the beginning. They don't need it all day, but they need it at night, and they need some help. The people that operate those businesses can't also be out in the street, sort of moving the line. So, I think we need some positive help there.
Absolutely, and we'll certainly do that. I just would like to have Chief Pittman or others speak on it, and we'll do so, especially when we come before you for approval of street closures and such. I'll make sure that's included.
Christy?
No.
Oh, Christy, then. Oh.
Thank you. This was brought up at the Economic Task Force meeting today, and I just wanted to reiterate it to the board that I think it's really important that we put out guidelines of what we're expecting from businesses. They want to be successful. They want to do everything right. They don't want to hear at the end of the season that we hated it because there was trash or there was parking issues. So I think it's going to be really important to kind of put together beforehand what we're expecting of outdoor dining, and so that businesses know how to be successful. I also think, I've said this before and I just want to say it again, the reason that 2020 was so successful was because of the social distancing and the limited capacity. So we didn't turn into Mardi Gras or New Orleans in big congested areas downtown. So if things move kind of quote back to normal, or these restrictions are lifted, I think we need to have really clear guidelines of what we expect outdoor dining to be, that it doesn't turn into an outdoor bar. If guidelines are moved to 60 or 70% capacity, do we shut down outdoor dining at 9 p.m. or 10? I think it's something that we need to have a discussion for before the summer season starts. So, thank you.
Thanks, Christy. Libby?
I just wanted to prepare you all for something. We have gotten very few applications to date for community service officers for this summer. And that may be for any number of reasons. Maybe they just haven't come in yet. Maybe people are otherwise occupied. But if we don't get more of them and we don't have a full complement of community service officers, we're going to have a real issue with things like having police presence downtown for extended periods of time and not at other areas. So we obviously will have to get that figured out and deploy resources as best we can as to where the priorities are. But this is where the task force could also come in very helpfully with the businesses. They may need to really be strongly monitoring their line queues and using measures and getting those measures in place right now that allow for things like online ordering and preventing the need for people to have to wait in extended lines. And that was one of the whole reasons for the task force and for the grant that the town is providing so that people could do all those things now. And Matt, I have been very mindful of when you noted that those things take some time to put in place, and they do. So people hopefully have been examining them and determining what's needed to get them in place for the summer. And hopefully also the task force can help provide resources for that.
Oh, Melissa, sorry.
Jason had his hand up before me. Go ahead. I defer to Jason.
Thanks, Melissa. I was just going to say, I think this is a great opportunity for us, and we're taking the opportunity. We're planning well. The task force seems to be firing on all cylinders. We have the right people involved. It's very collaborative, and we're way ahead of where we were last year. So I think we're going to learn. We have already learned what worked and didn't last year. We'll see what the applications come in, and so I'm excited about kind of where we are because it's a very collaborative approach. Question for Amy. Remind me of the process again. The applications will come in the next month, and then we'll bring this back and see how it fits into a policy decision.
Correct. So we have a similar type of application that was based off a planning model. It will come in. I'm going to organize an internal group. It has to go through some special things need to be done through planning and building. You need to talk to fire, police, those sorts of folks, Board of Health, make sure that those orders are extended, things of that sort, so that we make sure that when we bring it to you, that those things are worked out and we have those details and we can have a plan for you and address some of the comments and things that have come in. So those are in the process of coming in. We're reviewing them now. A lot of the same type of setup, so it's not going to be reinventing the wheel. There just might be some tweaks here and there. We're also in response to a couple things as far as making sure there's specific guidelines for folks. Our legal team has certainly helped me with a street kind of contract for sidewalk and street locations that's a little bit more laid out than we were able to do last year, consistent signage and information for those folks as well. So those things are all being addressed. And the technology portion as well, Karen and others in the group have been doing a great job in getting resources available to folks. And even folks who had no technology options last year are working it out and working on it. So I think we've seen some really positive progress in that area too as well.
Thank you. Melissa?
Thanks. I think Libby and Amy covered it, but I just did want to reiterate that is the purpose of the grant funding. And you'll get there later, but the grant applications will open on March 1st, and they should fund by April 23rd. So we're hoping to quickly turn around these resources to put them in the hands of the businesses that need them to plan for a successful season.
Thank you. Do we have anything more on this tonight? I mean, I think that there's a lot of pieces that we need to continue to discuss. I am a little bit worried that the island's going to be really, really busy this summer, and just my initial thinking about it, I have possibly some concerns with full-on street closures, particularly streets that access the steamship, the High Line, those kind of connections. But I definitely am open to continuing the discussion of it and recognize that things could be very similar to last summer, but I just don't know that we're fully fully have a clear picture of that yet. Jason, then Melissa.
Yeah, I know you're trying to move on, but if you're going to bring up that, Madam Chair, then I got to say, I think I see no problem closing down those streets. I know we're going to look at it, but we're trying to move into a non-car centric movement here in different ways. So even if it's busier, people will find different ways, and we will incentivize them to take buses and car share and Uber and all those things. So I think it's important for us to, if we need to close down those roads, we kind of owe it to the community to be able to visit a retail or restaurant safely. I think it doesn't matter if it's 100% capacity, everything's going to be still social distance apart. So I think we're going to need that economically and for kind of the well-being of the community.
Somebody else want to say something? There were other hands up. Melissa?
Thank you. That's a great point, Jason. And I also just wanted to add that in my short time on the Economic Task Force, retailers had communicated with us that outdoor dining does benefit other businesses. So where we may have some parking concerns, it is an economic boost for more than just the restaurants we're serving. So I think we have to consider that a more global incentive than just helping those businesses.
Matt?
I'll make it quick. Yeah, I'm with you, Don. I think all indications are we're going to be very busy. Guess last year, parking wasn't an issue, partly because people didn't, really come to stay around. It wasn't the same. It was just, there wasn't as much going downtown. I think that may shift a little bit, especially if the state is at 75% or some other variation, so we have to really think, and we have to think about how do we park, the Economic Task Force should talk about when does parking enforcement begin in the day? When does it end? When are the busiest times? How do we get coverage? How do we ensure people aren't parking all day long in those spaces, especially because we've taken 10 or 15 spaces away. So that part has to be really, thought through, or we're going to have a lot of complaints and not be able to do it in future years. So, I think that has to be, we can't wait till the summer and see what happens. We know what's going to happen. Let's plan for it.
Christy?
Thank you. Sorry, I had to comment, so I'll be quick, but I think Jason kind of hit it spot on that, part of our select board strategic plan is to not be so car focused. And, we want to make sure that we're supporting, our summer businesses as well as the visitors that are coming. And we've heard, kind of across the board that people have enjoyed the outdoor dining. So I think what we should be focusing on is the discussions, like Matt was saying, is how do we plan for this? And I think one of those is a discussion we're having this week with Libby on a potential shuttle, a NARTA shuttle that we had talked about last year that kind of got put on hold because of COVID. I think we should be having more conversations about how do we encourage workers to park outside of town instead of downtown. And those conversations will help us not have the congestion that we're scared of instead of trying to stop the street closures. Thank you.
I completely agree with all of your points. And I was actually not even focusing on parking. What I'm focusing on is the car ferry. And it's one particular street. I'm really worried about closing down Cambridge Street in its entirety for the entire summer season again. So that is the main focus. And I didn't want to single out a business, and I would be open to some kind of creative thinking, or maybe there's a way to expand the sidewalk, but to allow the flow of cars to access the car ferry to go that way. Otherwise, it creates a major congestion point on Washington Street, which is also the main access to the High Line. So that's the piece that I'm trying to think ahead about. I do agree with all of the other comments. And I'd like to see some of these things become more permanent, and think of ways to do it without closing down major connection points. Bill Greeter has his hand up. Bill?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick point when you're talking about outdoor dining. And that's also to take into account the impact on the surrounding neighborhood. The point being is it also impacts town departments. And I'm particularly talking about trash pickup and the remnants of people taking advantage of the outdoor dining. This past summer, without singling out any particular area, the DPW was overly taxed, trying to deal with the rubbish from takeout participants, and it became a neighborhood issue. And it will come up during the hearing process, absolutely, this year. And so I just wanted to ask that that be put on a checklist and have some consultation with Rob McNeil on how it impacted his ability to do things as well as impact the neighborhood. So thank you for that consideration.
Good point, Bill. Thank you. Rob, did you want to make a comment? I saw you turn your camera back on.
Sure. Thanks, Madam Chair. We're keenly aware of some of the situations that unfolded last year due to takeout. And we've been working with the manager's office and Amy at licensing to consider all of the above. And I definitely appreciate Mr. Greeter's comments and the support of all the island associations. We certainly were sensitive to their own neighborhoods, and certainly we're supportive of the burden that DPW faced.
Thank you. Can we continue this discussion next time? Okay. So that wraps up our COVID-19 weekly update, I believe, unless anyone has anything else. I'm going to move on to public comment for items not otherwise on our agenda for discussion. Are there any public comments this evening? I'm not seeing any hands, so I will move on. No new business. Approval of minutes, warrants, and pending contracts. Can we do the minutes and treasury warrants first?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second? All those in favor by roll call: Jason Bridges.
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella.
Aye.
Melissa Murphy.
Aye.
Matt Fee.
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. Approval of pending contracts. I think that Melissa's recusing from this.
Yes, I'll recuse from the vote on the chamber contract if you'd like to separate it out, or I can recuse from the whole thing, whichever you prefer.
Okay. However, which way you want it noted. I don't actually
While you're
have.
looking down, I'll disclose I'm a chamber member, but it's not meaningful to I can vote for.
I think there's 3 other things to vote on, but I'm happy to recuse from the entire pending contracts.
Somebody
in
want to
my
make
capacity as the interim president, CEO of the chamber.
Thank you.
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor by roll call: Jason Bridges.
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella.
Aye.
Matt Fee.
Aye.
Don Holgate, aye. That carries 4-0. Citizen departmental request, Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee request for approval and execution of At Climate Nantucket partner affiliation. Vincent?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So you might remember Acclimate. It's the group that brought about the Climate Change Awareness Month for last September. It's a group that's been on island about a year and a half, almost 2 years. It's the mission is as a public-private partnership supporting innovation and holistic approach and community communication addressing climate change and sea level rise for Nantucket community and beyond. Basically, it's an education group of sorts. They want to increase public awareness, and they have a partner affirmation that I hope board members have read. It went to the Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee. I think it was January 26th. They voted to approve unanimously, and now it's effectively just needs a signature. The it's an affirmation stating some fairly basic and obvious things that partner members of sorts, even though affirming members of agree that climate change is real, and other such basic principles.
I'll move approval.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor by roll call, Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. Thank you. If anyone wants to read the affirmation, it's in the packet. Next up, we have the real estate items. I will have to recuse from number 1, but I'll turn this over to Ken.
Thank you, Madam Chair. These are pretty straightforward. We were before you 2 weeks ago with the takings as to these properties, and today we're before you with the release of the easements. What's the situation is that these are, in each case, these are paper roads or the so-called ghost roads that are wholly within the property of the people involved. And so what we're recommending is what we did was we took an easement for them in terms of helping to solve the problems on the property, and we're now releasing the easement. In view of the fact that these paper roads are wholly within the individual properties, there's no consideration required because in fact, the people have already been paying taxes on the land that's involved in each of these easements. The first one is with respect to a property on Gladlands, and the second one is with respect to a property on White Avenue and Surfside. It has been reviewed by council and have drafted the form of the release, and it's my recommendation to you that we make separate motions with respect to each releasing the easements to the owners of the property involved, as indicated in your packet. Be happy to answer any questions.
I have a question, Jason, if that's all right. Yeah. Ken, was the Surfside that had utility issues, did it? Is that all sorted?
Yeah, the Badlands one had utility issues, and that was what created the problem because we kept having to move this off the agenda until we could get the two parties to agree with respect to it. So once we got them to agree, then we were able to bring it forward.
So those are all solved?
All solved, yes.
All right, I'll move approval of both.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor by roll call, Matt Fee,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
and I'm an aye. That passes 4-0.
Thank you. Next is Tucker.
Yeah, you did 1 and 2, right? Okay. Tucker Holland for item number 3.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and the board. I'm actually joined also by Ann Cuspa from Housing Nantucket. We're here tonight on, we think, a rather exciting item. This is in regard to an acceptance of an affordable housing restriction at 31 Fairgrounds Road. This is in conjunction with the recent approval of a grant and loan to Housing Nantucket for the development of 22 subsidized housing inventory eligible or SHI eligible year-round housing units at this location. This is an exciting collaboration between the Affordable Housing Trust, Housing Nantucket, and Billy Cassidy. This is the permanent affordability restriction, which is to the benefit of the town, which will restrict 6 of the units at 80% AMI or less, and 16 units at 200% AMI or less. And I might let Ann add a few words about the plans for the property, but we are hoping that you will accept this affordability restriction.
Thank you, Tucker. Ann, did you want to speak?
Sure. I'll just say, first of all, thank you very much for this opportunity. And thank you so much to the voters for approving the expenditures that enabled us to purchase a property. And we're just super excited to develop 22 units of workforce housing. It's desperately needed. These are varying income levels. So as Tucker said, 6 of them will be below 80% AMI, and the remaining 16 will be at levels certainly below 200% AMI, but shooting for some 110 and 150% AMI units as well. 1, 2, and 3 bedroom, all rental units.
Does the board have any questions? Jason?
Just a comment that this is a great example of another collaboration, right? A nonprofit, private entity, the town, being really creative and finding a way to make something like this happen. So kudos to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Melissa, Chris, and then Christy.
Sure. I just want to echo that. Congratulations and heartfelt thanks to Tucker for your leadership on this. It's been a long haul, but I think this is a fabulous outcome. So thank you.
Thank you.
Christy?
Thank you. Just to add to Jason's collaboration, the land bank is holding the conservation restriction. So it's just another great example of our collaboration across different entities. I also just wanted to comment that it's really great that Housing Nantucket will be, having the 200% as the max, but focusing more on that 110 to 150 because people will be placed in and then have room to grow a little bit before kind of, hopefully being able to buy on the market or a covenant program, but having it not be right at that 200% gives the flexibility that our workforce needs. So I think it's a really smart move, and thank you to all.
I would echo those comments. This is really exciting. And I know we're going to have some more announcements coming so that people can finally feel confident that that the 20 million is being put to very good use and things are really progressing in it. I see Rick Atherton has his hand up. Rick, would you like to speak?
I think, can you hear me?
Yes, but it's echoing in kind of a strange way.
Well,
oh, there you
I'm
go.
not sure where that's coming from.
No, you're good now, Rick. Go ahead.
Am I still echoing?
No, you're good now. Go ahead.
Is your volume turned up?
Yeah.
Rick, go ahead. I can hear you fine. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Now, can you hear me now?
Yep, Rick, you're good now. Go ahead.
Okay. Sorry about that. I think it would be helpful if you recognize the source of the $20 million that is part of this process and recognize Tobias Glidden as the sponsor of the article. This didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of a thoughtful process to bring a citizen-sponsored article to town meeting. And the citizens had to disagree with the finance committee and force the issue. So I think recognition is more than appropriate. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, Rick. Did not mean to not recognize that both Tobias and I believe Rick actually brought this article forward originally, and town meeting passed it quite overwhelmingly, and it's really exciting to see it all coming to fruition. So thank you. Tucker?
Yes, I'm sorry if I may, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Okay. Yes, indeed, Rick. To you and Tobias both, we very much appreciate this Neighborhood First funding and all of the support and guidance that you provided to help this pass at town meeting, and then the voters themselves for passing it, as well as the CPA funding that was used to fund this program too. So thank you very, very much.
Thanks, Anne. Tucker, did you have your hand up too?
I did, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. Yeah, I just wanted to add thanks as well, to Rick and Tobias. as Ann said, to the voters, and I mean, to the select board, to the Affordable Housing Trust, to the Coffin family, who I think shares the vision for the property. There's so many people that are part of making this, we think, what is going to be, just a tremendous success. And, beyond the shy eligibility, beyond perhaps contributing to Safe Harbor, I think the thing that Ann and I are most excited about are the fact that 22 Nantucket year-round families are going to have safe, stable, quality, affordable housing. This is, truly an exciting moment, and we're again so pleased to be here tonight. So we thank you all.
And thanks to everyone who contributed to the Neighborhood First Committee to help lay out these guidelines and move the program forward. Christy?
I was going to say, with that, can I make a motion to accept?
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor by roll call: Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. That carries unanimously. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have some public hearings. First public hearing that we will open is for a utility at 20 Newtown Road. I'll open the public hearing. National Grid.
Tim, can you review the petition, please?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. Tim Wyford, National Grid Electric, 100 East Ashland Street, Brockton, Massachusetts. For this first one, National Grid is petitioning to install one new handhole at the base of existing pole 2-84 on Fairgrounds Road. And this is for service to, I believe it's number 20 Newtown Road.
Are there any questions? Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this? I'm not seeing any hands. I'll close the public hearing. What's the pleasure of the board?
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor by roll call: Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Melissa Murphy, Matt Fee,
Aye.
Don Holgate, aye. I think we lost Melissa, but it's 4-0. Let's move on to the next one. Public hearing. We'll open a public hearing. This is for Old South Road to service 11 Miller Lane. Tim?
So this next one is, we're petitioning for 2 handholds to be located 55 feet apart on Old South Road. Handle number 1 will be located at the base of existing pole 40. And I believe the second handhole is to be located approximately 55 feet east. And this is for new service to number 11 Miller Lane.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak? Any board questions? Not seeing any. I'll close the public hearing. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Second?
Second.
Second? All those in favor by roll call: Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. That carries unanimously. Next, we have a utility public hearing for West Dover Street to service 79R Orange Street. Tim?
I'm recusing from that, Dawn.
Okay. Matt's recused. Tim Lyford?
So for this last one, National Grid is petitioning for approximately 35 feet of 2 3-inch conduits on West Dover Street from existing pole 5 to a handhole to be located in the public way. And this is for new service to number 79 Rear Orange Street.
This is a public hearing. Are there any public comments, any board questions? And I do have one more public hearing for National Grid after this, but I'll close the public hearing. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second? All those in favor by roll call: Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Don Holgate, aye. That carries unanimously. I have one, Tim, I have one for Pine Street, number 4.
Tom Stanton.
Okay.
Sorry, this is
Verizon.
This is Verizon. Okay, got it.
I was going to say,
It's a joint petition, but Tom should be reviewing it for Tom. I mean, for Verizon.
So Tom Stanton. I'll open the public hearing. Tom Stanton, are you there?
Madam Chair, I will note too that you received a letter that's in your packet from the abutter with concerns over this. And we also included some pictures that were taken on Friday just to give you a visualization of what the issue might be.
Okay. Tom Stanton, did you want to talk about this? I'm not sure if he's there.
Yeah, he's not responding.
Is the neighbor on as an attendee?
Not that I see.
Do we want to set this aside and go on to the next public hearings and see if Tom comes back on?
Yeah, let me see if I can find his number and text him.
Okay, I'm just going to pass over number 4. We'll leave that open for now and move on to number 5. This is a public hearing I'll open the public hearing to consider multiple amendment applications. This is for Bar Yoshi. Amy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you mentioned, there are multiple amendments in this application for Bar Sushi, which is at 21 Old South Wharf due to retirement of original owner and investor, and they also acquired an adjacent space. The following amendments are part of this application. There is a change of corporate name. So as you'll notice, originally in 2019, when they applied for the liquor license, it was Sushi 21 LLC. That has changed to Oswac Associates LLC. Additionally, there's a change of DBA. It started as Bar Sushi. It will be DBA Bar Yoshi. It will be a change of category request. They are requesting a change from current wine and malt beverages license to serve all alcohol license. Additionally, an alteration of premises. As I mentioned, they acquired the lease of retail space in addition to their original space. The addition of this adjacent space and outdoor patio space will add approximately 400 square feet and 43 seats. It was originally, I believe at 18, it was a small space. So they are expanding next door and into adjacent patio space. There's also a change of officers in the LLC change. I'll make a couple of comments as I did in the AIS, mention that we did begin this in March of 2020 when everything shut down. So there were some things dated that way. They put it on hold as they were able to expand into the outdoor space with a temporary program. They have acquired the necessary preliminary permits for renovations into the new space. They, of course, pending approval here and with the state would have to get final inspections. And that number that was put forth with the application as far as number of seats would have to be finally determined by a final inspection. So that was based on the engineering, the architect, and all of that. We have here with us Jay Maroney, who's the attorney with this license, if there are any additional questions.
Before you move forward, I just got a text.
I'm recused. I didn't get a chance to say it because you were so quick, Amy.
Okay.
Erica, go ahead.
I was just going to say that Matt was recusing.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Are there any board questions? Any public comments? Then I'll close the public hearing. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call: Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. That carries unanimously. Where are we with number 4?
Madam Chair, can I just say thank you to Amy for all her hard work on this and patience. We just really appreciate it. I just don't want to let that go unsaid. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Jay.
Ditto, Jay. Thank you.
Regarding number 4, we are having some technical difficulties with Tom Stanton. He has tried to call in, but he is still muted. Oh, here he goes.
Tom, is that Tom Stanton?
Tom, can you hear us?
Now it's muted again.
It's muted.
All right, I'm going to move on to number 6.
Hello.
He's here.
There he is. Okay. We'll go back to number 4. Tom Stanton, I'm going to go to you to go over the submission.
Yes, thank you very much. This is a customer request for Verizon to move pole number 159 over 9 Pine Street, 9 feet 6 inches to southerly on Pine Street to the property line.
So I mean,
that's
okay. It looks like there was a neighbor concern just with service interruption. Jason?
Yeah, I don't think I could vote for this as right now unless I get better clarification, or maybe some pictures. If it's going to hurt ADA compliance and people walking through there, I don't see the benefit from it, from what I can read. And I think Chief Murphy, fire chief, put that in the notes. And reading the letter from the abutter, it seems like I might need to see more pictures or make sure it doesn't congest that sidewalk anymore.
Well, to answer your question, the existing pole, it would be right in line with where the existing pole is now. So as far as ADA, it wouldn't add or subtract from any footage that you have now on the sidewalk.
Madam Chair, can I point something out?
Yes.
So these 2 properties have recently undergone major renovations. And where you see this picture that I'm sharing, where the new garage is, there actually used to be a fence right at the end of this fence that divides the 2 properties that actually went across the property on the right where the garage now is. So it actually, it would be the same, is what I'm trying to say, as it used to be before that fence got taken out in terms of ADA compliance. And you can't really bank on the space between the garage and the pole for ADA compliance because a great portion of that is private property.
Do they have a driveway there? Or is it really just a shed?
We're not really sure what is happening here.
Did they put in an application for a curb cut?
I haven't seen anything at traffic safety that's come through. But if it doesn't remove a parking space, it can go directly to the DPW and they can sign off on it. So I don't know if that has happened.
Okay.
Don, it's Matt.
Yeah, Matt, go ahead.
Could the pole go right to the end of that fence? Could it not be on the sidewalk at all? You know, and then you don't have, one of the issues that is cited in there is the difficulty of pulling around the pole to get into the garage, the new garage. If it were on, you know, if it were on their property 1 foot split between the two, we wouldn't have that issue at all, and we'd have the whole sidewalk. Has that been a consideration?
Tom?
You have to keep that pole line in line. If not, then you'd be adding anchors along the way, and you just compound the problem.
It's Matt again. That's too bad. It's that's all the more reason for burying these things through the whole downtown. And I know that's my favorite topic.
I'd love to do that for you. It'd be a great project.
I'm happy to put this over if the board has more questions. I'm comfortable with it myself. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak? Rick Atherton? Rick?
Can you hear me, Dawn?
Yep, go ahead.
Here we go. Dawn, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry. No, I just want to support going underground every opportunity we have. And I think the board needs to be prepared to step up whenever that's appropriate and available. Thank you.
From all of our discussions, I think the board is in full agreement with burying when it is possible. Tom?
Can I make a comment, please?
Yes.
On that? The burying utilities is, the cost of that doesn't fall on the utilities. It falls on either the customer or the cities or towns that want to have their facilities buried. So if that makes it any clearer how.
Oh, thank you, Tom. We understand that, and we know that burying the wires down.
Okay.
It's very significant because we have to work around all of the utilities and infrastructure. And we know that we're talking about a long-term planning process for this.
Yes.
Will it also include funding and overrides? Matt?
The Westover you just approved took 2 overhead lines and is burying both of those at the end of Dover Street. And it's anytime you touch these downtown, they're supposed to go underground. So that's why that was happening on that previous application.
Christine?
Thank you. I'm just wondering if Chief Murphy's comments were addressed about if the move will affect the neighboring driveway and their ability to get in and out of parking spaces.
I will note that since they didn't put it in their letter, I would assume that that's not an issue.
Thank you.
For the neighbor.
So I'm just understand what you do think that this one pole should go underground, because I don't think that functions for one to go down.
No, I'm not. Yeah. I'm making a motion to approve.
Okay. Well, I didn't close. Let me close the public hearing and then make the motion. Erica, did you have a comment?
I was going to say you have to close the public hearing.
Okay, thank you. Close the public hearing. Matt.
Motion to approve.
To approve. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor by roll call. Jason Bridges.
No.
Christy Ferrantella.
No.
Melissa Murphy.
Aye.
Matt Fee.
Aye.
Don Holgate, aye. It's approved. Last, number 6, we have a request for a change to the alcoholic beverage license at
Yes.
Amy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is simple change of category application for the Beat, which is on 9 South Water Street. They are requesting to change their annual wine and malt beverages license to add service of cordials and liqueurs. So it's a separate wine and malt beverages and cordials license. We have one other similar on the island, and the definition of liquor and cordials is on your form there, as that got asked last time. And as they are located within 500 feet of a church, you'll also be requested to vote that this is not detrimental to the spiritual activities of St. Mary's Roman Catholic Church, as is required by state law. Any questions?
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board? Any comments from the public? Any comments from the applicant? I think it's pretty straightforward. Amy, if you want to say something, you're welcome to.
Not really important, but it's just we feel like we've evolved a lot in the last 2 years, and being able to offer our guests a little more elevated beverage service is what people are looking for. So we're really excited to make this change, and we appreciate your consideration and all of Amy's help. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Amy Baxter.
Just a quick note on Amy and the Beat, and they did a lot of work over this COVID situation and preparing meals for others. So just to acknowledge a lot that they've done for the community throughout this and have stayed open. So I just want to acknowledge that.
Thank you. Any public comments, any board questions? Matt, do you have a question, or I need to close the public hearing? Now you can make your motion.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to approve it and also to find that it is not detrimental to St. Mary's Church.
Okay, all those in favor by roll call. Jason Bridges.
Aye.
I'm sorry, is there a second? I didn't take a second. And now all those in favor. Jason Bridges.
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella.
Aye.
Melissa Murphy.
Aye.
Matt Fee.
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. That carries unanimously. Thank you all again. Town managers report. Number 1 has been taken care of. On to number 2.
Number 1 has been taken care of. Yes, thank you. So the report is in your packet, and I won't go through every item, but just to highlight some of the things we've been spending a good deal of time on. Baxter Road long-term planning, as we know, a contract with Arcadis was executed at your meeting last week, and staff met earlier this week with the Arcadis team to work on coordinating and proceeding. And I think we said they are going to start sometime next week with working with Vince Murphy and getting stakeholder meetings and all of that initial startup underway. PFAS townwide risk assessment, as was presented at the board meeting last week, and we had a meeting yesterday with our consultant as to communications, and that is well underway, and we need to start working on next steps coming out of that report as well. So there's going to be quite a bit of time spent on that in the coming weeks. As far as meetings go, and involvement of town admin staff in various meetings, there is a Board of Health meeting tomorrow. Don't think they probably will be spending too much time on COVID issues. That would be why we'd attend or participate. And so most likely they're not going to be spending much time on that. Town meeting planning and election planning, that, as you know, is well underway, including the outdoor venue preparation that is taking quite a bit of time. FinCom meetings regarding warrant articles. FinCom starts up in a serious way on March 1st with their public hearing, and town admin will be working with them to develop motions, as well as planning is working on their motions, so the zoning articles. Budget planning, we presented our budget. We made our budget presentation with departments to the FinCom on Saturday, February 6th. Mass Municipal Managers Association, I was lucky enough to recently get appointed to a DEI task force that they have, and they have changed the name of task force to committee. They had a task force on DEI, but they've changed it to a standing committee. So I'm looking forward to being part of that and seeing what sorts of initiatives they will be putting forward, and hopefully we will be able to be a part of those as well. PFAS communications I mentioned. We had the Mass Municipal Association annual conference in January, and some of you, I think, attended some of the workshops. It wasn't, as we know, really quite the same as being there in person, but it was better than nothing. So most of us attended a number of workshops from that. There was a community open house on January 28th for the Coastal Resiliency Plan. That seemed to go really well. We're working on follow-up to the water company merger of Sconset and Wannacomet Water. We have an internal housing group that's working on a number of initiatives related to town employee housing and a number of projects that are just listed here. The solar project at Wannacomet is taking quite a bit of the energy coordinator's time to respond to emerging neighbor concerns. And so hopefully there's ongoing communication about that so that the projects hopefully can proceed, subject to the number of outstanding approvals that it still needs in order to happen. Preparing concession RFPs for issuance. We had a discussion with the board last week about jetties. That discussion is continued to March 3rd, and there is a lot of preparation going on in advance of that meeting. Police reform bill analysis. The police chief has prepared an analysis of that bill, and I think we're not going to review it with you in March because there's still some additional work to be done, but probably more like April. And that will be something that could take a little bit of time. Weight Drive is approaching the, I think if Rob is still on, he could correct me, the bid, the phase where it's actually going to start construction. I think the plans are just about done. And as you all know, we do have a grant covering a substantial portion of that project. We're still sorting through a sewer fee issue that emerged in December with a private sewer line off of South Shore Road. And that is going to most likely necessitate some sewer regulation changes. And we need to get that finalized. A few different things under the items that had to be put on hold due to COVID that we're trying to get back to category, including the revisions to the yard sale program, pool discharge and or stormwater regs, and Sheep Pond Road, as we know from tonight's update. Personnel, just some items listed there. As we know, our DEI director has been hired. He starts March 1st. And we continue to look for a permanent Our Island Home administrator. And we have an opening in the finance department for the budget analyst. And we are still looking for a transportation planner. We had a meeting this morning about the transportation planner position and what we might be able to do to get that position a potentially higher salary, because the way it's classified now is seeming not to be very effective, but it is a union position. So there are collective bargaining obligations that need to be taken into consideration. So those are just some of the things that we're working on. Any questions?
Jason?
Libby, can you remind me on the Harbor Master building? I know the timeline was altered with COVID and some other things.
Oh, the timeline of it?
Yeah, the Harbor Master building. I can't remember where we're at on that.
I think the design is finished. Bid documents are getting ready to be put out, and hopefully it will go out to bid very shortly, and construction would start this fall.
Thank you.
Matt?
Libby, does the transportation planner have to be a union position? Could that be could we categorize that differently if we're changing it?
Well, that's one of the things that we were talking about this morning. It's in the union now, and as a result, it requires negotiation to either get it out or reclassify it. And that sounds pretty simple and straightforward, but it isn't as simple and straightforward as it sounds. So we're working on a way to address it that could accommodate any union concerns.
Any other questions, comments before we move on to select board reports and comments? Okay, next up is the big agenda item tonight is we are going to adopt the 2021 annual town meeting and election warrant. I think there are a few more things to go over. Libby, do you want to take us through those?
Yep. So Erica, if you could possibly, oh good, Greg's on. If you could possibly screen share the warrant. There are 4 or 5 things that either have been updated or are still outstanding from last week. Just go to Article 7. Yeah, yeah. So last week, I didn't realize there were going to be some updates to Article 7, and you'll see a bit of an increase to the seasonal salary schedule, and that has to do with, I thought Amanda told me minimum wage, but don't think minimum wage is that. That has to, I think, do with being able to be competitive with hiring seasonal employees. We sometimes have trouble hiring them because they can make a lot more money in other areas doing the same thing. Erica, just go up a tad. Oh, okay. Fiscal 22, yeah. All right, now just go back down. I think there was a couple of seasonal positions that were moved from one category to another. You see seasonal labor there was moved, and there's a new seasonal position called lead natural resources technician that helps out in the lab. And I think that's it for Article 7. Nothing overly difficult. Article 70. That was the noise bylaw amendments, and we've been going around and around internally about this and trying to accommodate enforcement concerns. 70. Erica, I'm not seeing it move. Is it move? Okay, sorry. I should look away while all this is happening. Okay, right here. So I sent you all this updated article earlier in the day, and I think but late in the day. But I think what I mentioned last week was we've made some changes here that are difficult to follow through the use of strikeout and highlighting. So what we'd like to do is just go up a tad, is indicate that the bylaw, sections of this bylaw are going to be deleted in their entirety and replaced with the following text. And then in the voter's guide, we will have the actual redlined version so that people can see specifically what came out and what did not. So just look, okay. Yeah, go back to look at the comments here. So just to look at some of the comments, some of these are comments that town council had, and they were comments from last week, and they're not really material to changing any wording. They're just, please note that this wording might mean X. So that's what this is about, relating to entertainment licenses, and that the entertainment licenses would not be subject to this bylaw, which is the case now. There was an issue that Charlie raised about clarifying homeowner using tools not related to building construction, which we think has been addressed. Go down a bit more. Okay, stop there for a sec. Oh yeah, free speech issues, which are probably the case in the bylaw now. And then there's just some formatting issues that we need to fix before this goes. So Greg Corbo, you may have to explain some of this if the board has questions, but I think it's mostly just advisory. And there was just again, there's some formatting issues here with things like where did paragraph B go? I don't know the answer to that. But this issue about the 14 days, so prohibited noises, I think the concern here was if there's a noise that exceeds these restrictions listed in A, prohibited noises, the concern was once notified of a violation, the owner operator, if they fail to correct it within 14 days, then they get fined. So the question is 14 days too long? So if they're notified on, whatever, day 1, and can they really not do anything about it for 2 weeks? I don't know. So Greg, we might need you to comment a little bit about that. Or the board, it's probably, he'll probably say that it's a policy issue for the board to determine that. But that could be one of the things that happens here. Someone gets notified of this noise issue, but they don't do anything about it because they wait till for the 14 days to turn it off or correct it or whatever. Is there anything down below that, Erica? Oh yeah, I think that's addressed. Greg, do you want to add anything? Greg Corbo?
Yes, thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I did recommend a number of changes to the bylaw. Most significantly, I think I don't know what to call it, but basically I organized the enforcement provisions. In the previous draft that we had looked at, there were enforcement provisions in different areas of the bylaw. And what I tried to do was put those all into a single provision. And then I did flag a few constitutional issues. Some of the language is a carryover from the existing bylaw. But since the time that the existing bylaw went into effect, some of that language has been reviewed by courts and the attorney generals and has proven to be problematic. And in fact, in some cases, stricken by the attorney general's office as not being consistent with state law. And so I did exchange those comments with Leslie and Charlie Gibson. And I know Charlie had a number of concerns about those comments and how the language I was proposing might affect the ability of the police department to enforce this bylaw in the way that it was intended. And the last message that I saw from him this afternoon was that perhaps the police department might want to pull this proposal at this point so that we can have additional time. And I don't know if Charlie is here and wants to address any of those issues.
I don't think we actually had him on as a panelist or an attendee. And it would be up to the board as to whether or not this is getting to be too extensive, but it has been discussed for a few months now. Is Leslie on? I don't know if she wants to add anything. Oh, there she is.
I mean, could we still make changes through FinCom's motion if we needed to? Because I think it's the whole year.
Yeah, we potentially could do that. I don't think we're talking about too much here, and hopefully we wouldn't really have to do much of that because that also gets a little confusing for the public. But I suppose as long as we're very clear on what is changing, that's maybe not that big of an issue.
Rick Atherton has his hand up. Rick, do you have a question on this or a comment?
Dawn, I do. Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Just a general observation. This is clearly far more technical than I think 99% of our voters can follow. I think the intent is to limit the impact of noise, but I find it very, I'm not sure what the right word is, troublesome. The technicalities of enforcement are always an impediment. And to me, the board needs to concentrate on the substance of limiting the impact of noise on all our neighborhoods and simply find a way to get around these impediments. They can go on forever and really kill any initiative that tries to accomplish the objective. Thank you.
And through you, Madam Chair, if I could, respond to that. This is a complicated subject because it does, touch upon rights that are potentially protected by the Constitution. And, I know that the police department's concerns were that some of the changes I was suggesting would impede their ability to enforce the bylaw, which certainly was not what was intended in making those comments or recommendations. And, I don't want to see a bylaw put into effect that anybody thinks is not effective in accomplishing the goals of the town. And so if that's the understanding at this point, and I did receive this sort of late in the game in terms of where it's been in development. So I didn't really have a chance to work with the committee that was putting this together from the beginning, or perhaps we could have addressed some of those issues earlier. And so I really will defer to staff as to whether they want to go with my changes or leave what they had originally in place.
Leslie?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to Greg Corbo for helping with this. The town manager asked that we put together a work group, which we did. I think a lot of effort has gone into this. I think overall the changes are, not incredibly significant over the text of the whole bylaw. I mean, there are some significant changes in there, but a lot of this is carryover from what was already existing. And, if you include it in the warrant, there is time for additional work and through additional changes in the FinCom motion if necessary. So I would ask that you all include it in the warrant tonight and let it move forward. And if it proves to need more time, then the FinCom can make a motion to take no action and we can work on it throughout the year.
Thank you. I'd like to include this in the warrant personally. I think that, one of so many of the complaints that we get throughout our community are really and truly noise related. And I think addressing some of those concerns is important, and also I think needed some tweaking in how the enforcement's done and so forth. Matt?
Does it still apply solely to the downtown district? That was one of the concerns of the non-voting taxpayers that brought it forward. That's number one. I'm pleased to see there was a loophole in there. I think it was 3D or one of those loopholes that was closed to say it was select board license. But does this still just apply mainly downtown?
Leslie?
So what applies to the old historic districts is the expanded hours on noise restrictions. So just in the old historic district, construction and landscaping type noises have been expanded to be prohibited between, sorry, it's hard to do the hours backwards, 5 p.m. to 8 a.m. So that's a significant expansion. It's not an expansion to the extent that the non-voting taxpayers wanted. They had requested anything under half an acre. That's a huge amount of the island. And it really doesn't leave a lot of room. And I don't know what the justification for that would be in terms of, the reasoning for it. I mean, I understand like not wanting to, bother your neighbors and that sort of thing. But our reasoning with the work group for recommending the old historic district is because that's, the more dense area of development. That's where the guest houses and inns and hotels are. That's the core economic area. And we could draw a direct line between the impacts of noise in that area. So I think that's a huge improvement. And, if it needs to be expanded further, maybe that's something we could talk about later. But I think right now, that's a big step.
And Leslie, that also applies to the Sconset Old Historic District, correct?
Yes.
Just one quick comment on that. I feel like there may be some pushback from service providers with it being light out till about 9 o'clock at night in the height of the summer, on whether 5 o'clock might be a little bit too early of a cutoff. I don't know if the work group discussed if maybe it should be like 6 or 6:30 or something like that.
So there was a lot of discussion about the hours, and we had people from different industries on the work group. And because it is so early, that's part of the reason why the area is so limited.
Okay. It could always be amended if someone wanted to amend it at town meeting. Any other comments on this? How is everyone comfortable with it moving forward on the warrant, maybe with some additional tweaks that could be made as the finance committee makes their motion? Okay, I'm getting thumbs up, so I'll say yes. Can we go on to the next item in question?
Okay, next is car rental, Article 74. And I think Attorney Corbo could speak on this, and I think the airport manager is on to speak on it as well.
Yes, thank you through you, Madam Chair. So after our discussion last week, the major issue of concern was that there was a feeling on the part of town staff that they weren't quite ready to endorse a wholesale change in the current program. But at the same time, there was a concern for the airport that if we had to wait until the next town meeting, that's essentially a 2-year delay in implementation. So the compromise we came up with was to make it an amendment to the bylaw, which will authorize the select board to enact regulations to address issues such as what the cap on total number of vehicles is going to be, how the medallions will be distributed within that cap, whether there should be any change to fees or any other issues associated with rental cars that might have to be addressed. And so we did make a proposal. That proposal was reviewed by counsel for the airport. And I believe that the version that they reviewed is the version that's in your packet. There are really only 2 substantive issues that I think remain for discussion on the part of the select board. And that is a suggestion by the airport that the select board act to enact these regulations by a deadline of January 1st, 2022, versus the original suggested language, which was that the select board would have the authority to enact regulations, but the existing system would stay in place until it does. And then the only other issue was whether you as the select board wish to have the authority to change the cap either above or below 700 cars, whereas the airport wants to limit you to only increasing the cap to above 700. So those are the 2 substantive issues that have yet to be worked out, unless there are questions from the select board as to what you have in front of you.
Okay. I'm not really comfortable with the date certain. I think that should be up to our discretion on when we enact that. I don't think it needs to be in the bylaw. I think that we will move towards getting the regulations in place to fix the issues that have been raised. And I'm personally not comfortable. I'll go to the other board members with lowering it below the 700. I wouldn't want to take anything away that exists right now, but maybe the other board members feel differently. Matt?
Yeah, before we get into the details of this, I think that there's the policy decision is, do we really want, before we even get into these details, do we really want to wade into, taking away the medallions every year and then giving them back out and having that at our discretion? And, this isn't as simple as it sounds. The airport wants to do something. I'm not quite sure why yet, but they want to make a change, but they're putting it all onto staff and onto us to determine that. And we've gotten some very good letters from some of the providers now who have some pretty compelling reasons that it works right now. And I, for one, do not want to bring it to town meeting. I want to pass it over. I don't want to be in the position of canceling people's, these are now transferable. They're sellable, and so I don't want to be in the situation where, where we are, playing God every year and getting lobbied and everything else that will happen. I just think that this is a lot more than just a couple tweaks on the on the screen and let's let the town meeting decide. I think we're moving too quick. I'd like to, pass over this. I'll listen to what everyone else has to say and I'll make that motion later.
Christy, did you have your hand up?
I did. I guess I'm just wondering kind of what the clear goal and intent of this article is. I think when it came to us, every week it's been evolving. And last week there was discussion about cleaning up some of the language because it's almost 30 years old. And I guess I'm just wondering kind of what occurred at the airport commissioners meeting and why these two things are being moved forward, kind of what is the intent?
Tom Rafter, would you like to speak to that?
I can try. I'll reiterate again, our concern is that when we put out the request for proposal, should a new entrant provide a proposal that far exceeds and meets all the criteria and exceeds all the criteria and is ranked higher than, let's say, an existing operator, that we have the ability to make a selection. Today, we can't do that because they cannot obtain medallions without possibly purchasing them from an existing operator. And to Mr. Fee's point, yes, the system's working very well for the existing operators. I agree completely. But that's not to say that, that's kind of closing the door on anybody else coming in should we elect to select them because they may have a better proposal. So the idea and a lot of these recommendations came from other issues that were found through the licensing administrator. We were simply just looking at making this, just allowing it so that there is competition available. So the limit on cars, the commission voted, they would like to see a floor of the 700. And the issue with the date is, again, backing into when we have to have RFPs out on the street, ready to award, and in time for to meet the deadlines that are when the agreements expire.
I don't know if Amy wanted to add anything to that from the licensing perspective.
Sure. Obviously when this came up and other things have come up, we literally have no answer for someone who coming up in this sort of situation, as far as there was literally nothing we can do because all medallions are assigned. And, we've noticed, for the most part, they are used. Some of the ones that have smaller amounts use them consistently, local folks as well. But I can identify a good 50 that have not consistently, that have just been paid for or sat on for at least 5 years as well. So there was some movement there, but there was no outline of a process of anything of that sort that we could review that with the board and possibly move some of those. Or if a new player came into the airport through this process, would they transfer from someone else? How would that sort of situation work? And would that be helpful to the consumer to have another choice? It wasn't about creating more medallions, but looking at a system that's kind of sat for 20, 30 years without review. And is there a way to do it better? Not to completely add more cars. I don't want that. None of us do. But have a more competitive environment. And certainly it's created this shadow industry as well on some of these websites and folks renting cars. And I get complaints from current medallion holders all the time about that. So I'm looking for ways to help manage that as well. So from my perspective, it's something I've wanted to look at and review and see how this works in the environment we have now. But if it's brought up a lot of issues and folks are getting a little concerned about more cars and perhaps need more time, but I want a compromise to be able to let the airport do what they legally need to do in this RFP process. So if that makes sense, that's my thoughts.
Matt, and then Dan Drake has his hand up.
Yeah, I guess I have a question for Greg Corbo is, when I brought up last week that, and the suggestion, and I want to know if it's legal, could the RFP from the airport say that this is with the understanding that you will acquire the licenses. That you're bidding and the people bidding must have a license. They have, like we would if someone wanted to do a liquor license and they're capped. We just don't give it to them. They have to go buy it. They have to get it from someone else. Could we do that legally at the airport and then get rid of that issue?
Through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Fee. Yes, in my opinion, you could, include in the RFP a requirement that the successful bidder will be responsible for obtaining the necessary medallions, to the extent that they're available. And if an existing holder is not the chosen or the winning bidder, they would have the choice to either sell those medallions to the person who's successful or not, or just hold on to them. And then in which case, that award would not be able to be made. Whether or not that resolves the problem, I'll leave that to the airport and licensing to answer that particular question.
Thank you, Greg. Dan Drake.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to confirm that the Airport Commission did discuss this at its meeting on Tuesday night and voted by a vote of 4-1 to support the article with the two provisions in it, one relating to the January 1, 2022 effective date, and the other relating to the maintaining the minimum number of medallions at 700. The only area of disagreement with one commissioner was on the floor of 700 medallions, and that particular individual thought the number, there should be an option to make the number lower. But other than that, the concept of the article per se was approved unanimously. And I think that the point about making the new entrant acquire medallions is somewhat disingenuous, frankly. There are reasons for liquor capping the number of liquor licenses, so that there are social reasons for doing that. There are no social reasons for allowing one particular operator to, if you will, sit on or hoard medallions just to keep other people out of the market. And I think that's an important consideration here. And I know it sounds harsh, but I believe it's something to be considered. And the ultimate result will be better service and hopefully better rates for people renting cars. I'd also like to quickly address the issue of traffic created by this. This was brought up by Judith Wagner from the planning board at our meeting. And my response to her was that emplanements at the airport have gone down by more than 2/3 in the last 10 years. So people coming to the airport and going through the airport is down very significantly. And this I don't believe this modification will cause any additional traffic problems. The ones that are there are very few of them are related to the airport. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Matt?
Yeah, I think there's operational issues. There's responsibility is put onto Amy or onto the select board are fairly substantial here. I agree. Sort of if this has been studied and it came back with all the, I feel like we're trying to do this in 3 or 4 meetings, and I just think it came late. And I just, I think if we're going to try to fix sort of hoarding, I don't believe this does that, other than we'll have to fix it later. I don't think it explains how we fix it, what we're going to do. I just think this is a article that's going to have unintended consequences that are going to be our responsibility, that I think it needs more work before we get there. I do think that it has quality of life issues. I don't agree that this is, this is different than a liquor license. I think it's very similar. That's why we put it in place. If we don't, again, I'll One of the letters we received today talked about the benefit the on-island cars do that are registered here versus the large companies bringing them, and we get $100 a car versus $1,005 in excise tax. I think there's an advantage to keeping our car businesses here as much as possible, as opposed to, well, they're going to give us a better rate and they're going to come down and fill the boat coming and going. I just think I've seen it in other locales and other places, California, Hawaii, and it is not what we want to be doing here. So I'd like to support our island businesses that are counting on this. If there's changes that we make with their consultation between now and next year to, so if it isn't used for a year or two, you lose it, things like that, great, let's talk about it with the people it impacts. But I think that this is, sort of too much too soon. And we've been doing it on Zoom rather than, through a thoughtful process with planning and everybody involved.
Melissa?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. My question is, if we don't vote to put this on the warrant, then what happens with the next RFP process, Tom? Nothing changes? And what position does that put the airport in?
I've tried to ask that question a few times, and I've asked for assurances from either town council or whomever to assure me that when we put this out, that this will be a fair, competitive, and open bid process. And if we were to receive a challenge, what the outcome may be. That's the question. I don't know the answer to that. But I don't want to be in a position where we put out an RFP, we have a proposal that is ranked higher than possibly one of the existing ones, and award it only to find out that they're unable to obtain medallions.
Jason?
Yeah,
Melissa?
Yeah, just give my 2 cents. If this is what I think it is, if it goes to town meeting and it passes, it gives the select board, the policymaking board, to make certain changes, but we don't have to make any changes. Right? If that's the case, I'm okay with it going forward. And if it fails, then it does. I've kind of, a roundabout ways, talked to Amy about this over the years of kind of some of the challenges, and there's really no way to kind of dig in and fix it. Doesn't mean adding or lowering. I don't think it has to maybe even come to us every year. We don't really know what our options are, but even if we dig into it and we find something that we want to do, we won't be able to do it until the following year, which might be okay for us select board wise. But I'm okay with it going forward. I agree with you, Don. I don't want to put a date to it. It has to be done by then. I would suggest taking that out, or I wouldn't vote for it if that was in there. But I don't think we have to do anything if it does pass. I understand Matt's concerns. Thanks.
Melissa? Melissa?
Sorry, navigating back to the unmute button. So I guess just to follow up on my question then, and perhaps to Attorney Corbo through you, Don, is what is the impact on the RFP process? Does it create an illegal or illegitimate bid situation for the airport if this doesn't change?
Thank you through you, Madam Chair. I'm not familiar with the airport's process for procuring, vendors. That's something I would defer to their counsel to analyze. However, you have a bylaw that's in place that established this current program, which states that the vendors who were in place on a certain date were essentially able to lock in the number of vehicles that they had on that date, and that there is a cap over which you can't give out any additional medallions. And so my opinion would be that it would be, difficult for someone to argue that there's an unfair bid process when you're constrained by the requirements of the bylaw. But again, unless and until we're fully involved in this RFP process, I can't fully answer that question.
And I would add that any RFP contemplated by the airport make it very clear that the rental of automobiles is subject to that bylaw, and any potential or prospective proposer is going to have to meet the criteria in the existing bylaw. And I don't see any legal issue with that as long as the RFP makes that clear.
Thank you. Matt?
And I was going to suggest something similar. My suggestion now is that the airport, before it puts out an RFP, gives it to KP Law to review to make sure we don't create a situation that gets the town in trouble. Their counsel can look at it, but I think counsel for the select board in the town should look at it to double check that we aren't writing something that does cause an issue.
Tom Rafter?
Just a note, yes, all of our procurement processes must go through the chief procurement officer, through the town. So we don't act independently or operate on our own. These all have to be approved through the town anyway. So.
Thank you. Christy?
Thank you. I'm still kind of trying to grasp this and understand it, and I can understand where Matt's coming from and feeling like this is a little bit rushed. So kind of thinking out loud, speaking out loud, does staff have the capacity to put the new guidelines or work on new guidelines? Because it sounded like the airport needs these by January 1st in order to put out a new RFP. And so even if we remove that date from the warrant, it sounds like that's still a deadline that the select board and town admin would need to meet. And my second comment is I'm wondering, would the board feel comfortable if we left the part in where, the responsibility comes to the select board to tackle this, but removing that restriction on detailing the number of cars? Thanks.
My understanding is that the deadline would be January, but otherwise it would stay the same until the following year. Is that right? I mean, this basically, town meeting gives the authority to put this in the select board's hands to sort this out and work in conjunction with the airport. And I would say, and work in conjunction with the current operators to talk all of this stuff through. I mean, our enterprise account, our airport commission have requested this of us to put forward. Our licensing administrator is requesting this of us. This gives us the time, if it does pass at town meeting, to sort through all of these pieces. I mean, I don't want to do anything that hurts existing local businesses, but there's obviously some problems that have been identified, some services that are not being adequately met, a number of questions with the process, and some just outdated pieces to this. So, I mean, I hope that we'll agree to put this on the warrant. I don't think that the way it is now proposed is not anything that is not going to allow this discussion and being thoughtful about this to continue. But I do want to take the date out, because just in case, we have no idea what the next 6 to 8 months hold for us in terms of priorities. Matt?
Yeah, I think if you're going to take the date out, you should also take the, no lower than 700. I think it should take it out completely. I'm not going to support it because I think it's making work that doesn't need to be made. And I haven't seen the list of issues at the airport that we need to solve, and I haven't seen why this is going to solve it. So, I'm not going to support it, but I suggest taking those two out. I'm listening to town council, and they're telling me that we can write an RFP and we can move forward, and the airport is covered and fine as is. And so I would rather do that, but I can see where this is going. So I would take out the number and I would take out the date.
I'd be okay with that. Greg?
Through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, so the original language that I had proposed stated that the select board is hereby authorized to enact regulations to effectuate the purposes of the bylaw. And the intent of that language was, to give the board flexibility, that, if you couldn't enact the regulations by a certain period of time, that you weren't compelled to do so, and that if you didn't do it, then the bylaw as it's written now would just simply continue to exist until such time as you enacted those regulations. And so, that would give you the opportunity to, meet as a board and discuss it, to survey the interested stakeholders, to make sure that everybody's opinion, is weighed. And it does specifically require that there be a public hearing before any changes are made. So, my suggestion would be to at least leave that first sentence as originally written, so that it says the select board is hereby authorized to enact regulations to effectuate the purposes of this bylaw. And then I'll leave it to you to decide whether you want to have the flexibility to lower that cap under 700 or not.
Thank you, Greg. I'm open to the flexibility. I just hope that no one takes it as any intention from this board to start taking away medallions, because that worries me. That was why I was comfortable with leaving it as is, but it seems like the majority of the board would just like to have full flexibility on when we enact this and how we enact it. So does someone want to make a motion?
I can make a motion, Don, but is it what you just said, Greg? Is that what we would be making the motion on? Just want to make sure I'm clear on the wording that's in our packet.
I think what Greg just said, and to allow it to go on to the warrant with those
Right.
provisions.
So what I would suggest is to accept what's shown in the packet, but with changing the first clause to read, the select board is hereby authorized to enact regulations to effectuate the purposes of this bylaw.
Is everybody clear on that?
I will make that motion. That is pulling out the structures that we.
The date and the number.
The date and the number, correct?
Well, what I just said is just the date, but then also to remove the language that says, provided that the number is not below 700.
Okay, I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second it for discussion.
Okay, is there discussion? Then I'll go to a vote. Christy, go ahead.
Sorry, just to clarify, so we took out that date, if nothing happens by the end of this year, the airport will still go to an RFP with the current regulations. And then we'll still have time to look. That's correct. I'm getting a lot of head shakes, so thank you.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair, that's correct. And so whatever RFP process the airport goes through will be subject to the existing requirement that any person who submits a proposal or to qualify to win a proposal would have to be able to obtain the medallions from an existing holder.
Matt, then Christy.
Yeah, again, we don't have to bring an article to town meeting to tell us to work on something over this year and the next year or the year after. We could actually just work on it. And the airport could work on it right now and come back with, here's how we want to handle these issues. We have these issues and here's how we want to handle them. And, and the rental car companies have agreed and we agree and the planning board agrees and now we can bring it. you know, I just think we're doing something unnecessary. I know we're going to do it, and that's fine, but I just think it's unnecessary. So that's why I'm explaining why I'm going to vote against it before I do.
Christie, and then we'll go to a vote.
I forgot my train of thought.
Are you comfortable going to a vote? Okay, all those in favor by roll call, Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
No.
Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Christy Parentella,
No.
John Holgate, aye. Rick, I do see that you have your hand up, but we were in the middle of a vote. Do you want to make a comment before I move on?
Dawn, I do. I just have a general impression listening to this that the discussion, in a sense, is taking authority, excuse me, authority away, perhaps from town meeting, and giving it to the select board. I want to make sure I get that straight before I have a position. And I'm not sure, until you have further discussions, that's a good decision to make. Thank you.
Well, it sounds like we'll be discussing it more on town meeting floor and before then as well. What's the next item? Matt?
Before we leave, just a question for, for town council, for someone. If we bring this to town meeting, can somebody, and I'm still, can someone make an amendment that would, lift the cap or do anything else that we don't want to have happen? Is there anything like that?
Does John Giorgio? John, you're muted. I think you're speaking, but you're muted.
Sorry, I thought I unmuted. Thank you, Madam Chair. So any bylaw is susceptible to amendment on town meeting floor, subject to the very important caveat that it must be within the scope. And that is a determination to be made by the moderator. And knowing your moderator, I think her analysis would be whether or not the voters were sufficiently warned that such an amendment would be considered by town meeting. And often that's done through an analysis of whether you're making the bylaw more restrictive, which is a problem, as opposed to less restrictive. So we'd have to see the specific amendment, consult with the moderator, and she would make the ultimate determination whether it's within the scope.
Yeah.
So removing it makes it less restrictive, correct?
Yes, I would say so. But again, it doesn't matter what I think or you think. It's up to the moderator.
No, I understand, but this is the theory of unintended consequences. We do something so we can work on it this year, and then someone smarter than me shows up at town meeting and does something like that, and then we have then the protections we put in place 25 years ago are all gone, and we have Hertz or somebody with 2,000 cars every summer. I hope that's not what we've done. So.
Can we move on to the next item? I don't think that that's going to happen, but can we move on to the next item?
Did you vote to adopt the warrant? Oh, the next item on the warrant, sorry, that's it.
Any more questions on the warrant before we vote to adopt the warrant? Are we good to adopt the warrant now? That was the remaining outstanding item? Okay. Is there
did I miss the discussion of pension obligation bonds? Have we had that discussion?
I believe the finance director explained it last week.
Okay.
But I'm sure that he could explain it again.
Do you have a question, Matt? Do you want Brian to go over it?
No, I understand. I understand what they are. I think yeah, it's, I
Matt,
get it.
if you're talking about the home rule petition, it would allow the sale of these. Basically, doing it now would allow this selling these bonds at a very low interest rate, which would over time save a lot of money with the pension obligation.
Right. And I agree with that. And that makes sense. We're basically arbitrage and we're doing that. I think the reason we need to do this, we have, sort of my comment is we've got to get to the heart of why we're having to do some of the things we're doing, which is we need to negotiate and budget better, but that's a different issue. I have read a fair amount about it, and that's sort of one of the points that keeps coming up. Some towns have done presentations on this, and it's pretty interesting. But I support it. I just think I wanted to make that comment, and I missed it last time. And we'll still have a chance to put notes on these if we want. Okay.
Yep, you make your comments beginning of April, I think.
Right. Yep. The other thing we're going to end up talking about the ballot, but the other thing I'd like to talk about, I think the ballot has got 6, 7 things. Personally, I would like to see us get rid of possibly the Lover's Lane and possibly the $7.5 million, get it down to 5 things and push those hard. But but that would mean that I wouldn't want those others I wouldn't want Lover's Lane necessarily on there. I think we're going to be I'm worried that we could be asking the voters for too many overrides, and that they'll pick, I would rather do Newtown Road than Lover's Lane. I think we, as a town, caused the problems at Newtown, and we should, correct those and try to focus on those. And I think we could do Lovers later. And the other issue is, as I've talked about at length, I think we should back Arthur Reed's article and take the $7.5 million off. And then that would be 2 less on the town meeting, and that would be 2 less at the ballot, and maybe all 5 would pass at the ballot. I don't know if people don't support that, so I'm asking if anyone thinks that that's a good idea.
I do worry about having too much on the ballot, so we probably should discuss it before we adopt the warrant. And I'm not opposed to your thought process of doing one road improvement, because we've had such bad luck with the road improvements, and Newtown is at the top of our strategic priority list, even though I would love to see Lover's Lane done ASAP as well, as along with all the other roads out in Surfside that are in disrepair. But one other thing to your point, Matt, I do support the $7.5 million to continue the Neighborhood First program. I also do think that Arthur's approach is very reasonable. We have discussed that before, but there are just 2 questions I'd want to raise on it. One, 2/3, I think, might be too much money to take out of the general fund, because the way I see it right now, I think we're about double what it was prior to including the STRs, when we were just accepting basically the lodging tax without the short-term rentals included. So I'd just be worried about how we would make up that deficit. I also think that it would, if it did pass in its current form, it would kick our budget out of balance. And last, I'm a little bit worried about it not being a nimble source of funding, because a stabilization fund requires a 2/3 vote of town meeting to remove any money. So I'd want it to be something where it would go in and kind of go right back out into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund on a yearly basis, so that it would become nimble funding. But it doesn't have anywhere near the same impact as the 7.5. So I just wanted to raise those points along with the budgetary points, which maybe Brian has a comment on that. I see his mic's off. I'm on.
I mean, if it were to pass in the fiscal 22 budget, it'd immediately be
Thank you, Melissa. And then I've got Brooke Moore with her hand raised.
Thank you, Don. Matt, I also agree with Don that and some of your comments about, the concerns around the ballot, but I'll just reiterate my support for keeping the $7.5 million on the ballot. I think we need to, and again, just to say it again, I think we need every option on the table. We need a clear conversation. And it's probably going to be some combination. I'm not 100% sure that I think the land bank article will garner enough support, but I think between the some perhaps modification of Mr. Reed's article will create consistent long-term funding source, whereas a $7.5 million I feel like is responsive to the needs in the shorter term. And I do trust the voters at town meeting to have that debate and conversation along with clear communication from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund about how those monies and just as you were saying, Brian, where some of those complications come in from the different funding sources. I think this is a really complex juggernaut, but there is a simpler way to talk about it. But I'm happy to entertain. Again, I would like to see all the road improvements done, but if we needed to prioritize and make the ballot a little bit more palatable to the voters, I would be happy to entertain prioritizing Newtown Road.
Christy, then John Giorgio, and then I have 3 public hands raised now.
Thank you. Melissa touched on it, but I just wanted to lay out the $7.5 million is really kind of more for the short-term funding of affordable housing and keeping us in safe harbor, which is one of our main goals, as well as a clear goal of the voters by the passage of the $20 million, the 2019 town meeting. And I think the land bank article and Arthur Reed's article are more long-term funding options. So if the board wanted to take a position, I would say it would be between those 2 articles and not necessarily this $7.5 million versus Arthur Reed's article. So I just wanted to put that out there. And I also do agree with Matt that having so many things on the ballot could prevent them from passing. So I'd be okay with removing Lover's Lane for this year and putting it until next year or a special town meeting.
Thank you, Christy. John Giorgio.
Yes, Madam Chair. So I just wanted to remind the board that to put a debt exclusion question on the ballot requires a 4/5 vote of the select board. So 4 of you have to agree to the list of questions that are going to be debt exclusion, not overrides, but debt exclusion questions on the ballot.
Thank you, John. I'm going to go to the public now. Brooke Moore is first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to express my appreciation for the support of the 7.5 million debt exclusion. I see this as insurance on continued progression in our safe harbor status. And that is designated for, in theory, we have a timeline worked out, a set of units, development subsidizing a set of units at Orange Street property that was acquired already under Neighborhood First. And that it's critical that we have advance notice that the funding is available in order to execute the RFP process and generate interest among developers to do a proposal on that project and know that there's an available subsidy. So that's critical for our shorter term, as Christy said, safe harbor needs. And then I do think that there's sort of a medium term and long term planning regarding the Affordable Housing Trust funding stream. And I do think that allocating a portion of the short-term rental tax is an important piece of that puzzle. I think it's important for everyone to understand that the transfer fee legislation, that we refer to as the housing bank, every version of that, and there are a number of versions from enabling legislation to our own home rule petition, limit the use of those funds at 175% AMI. So there's a portion of our need between 175 and 200% AMI that exists in the community that could not be addressed with the housing bank anyway. So use of STR funds through a stabilization fund would give us a way to address that need in the community on a long-term basis. And so the Housing Trust is meeting tomorrow. And one of the things we're going to be talking about is a communications plan on this very complex issue. And we look forward to sharing with the community the pros and cons of all the options. And ideally, we could come up with a compromise that a large number of the constituencies involved in this could agree upon, that sort of pull pieces of a funding stream together from many of these options. So for the short, medium, and long term. Thanks.
Thank you, Brooke. Rick Atherton.
All right. Dawn, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, thank you. I don't like to admit that there are articles proposed for the warrant that I haven't read closely, but Mr. Reed's is one of them. I would like to just say in a general way that any attempt by the board to take an article to town meeting that involves long-term annual commitments to affordable housing beyond meeting the state mandate of 10% concerns me, number one. And number two, I think there's a general feeling, apparently among some people, the Capital Program Committee or others, that all these projects are high priority. And I would also be concerned about having a project to construct a new road when we continue to have maintenance problems among our current roads. I've said that before. I think we're asking people for more than they might be prepared to support, and you face a significant risk in all your capital articles because of that. Thank you.
Art Gasparro.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I be heard?
Go ahead.
So I would like to advocate for keeping Lover's Lane on the warrant. I understand that you're all trying to make some very difficult decisions, though I can tell you that I travel that road frequently to the camp. It's in horrendous shape. There's been a lot of development along that road. I can't imagine being in the back of an ambulance on that road. I can't imagine having a fire truck have to get to my house if I had lived on that road. It's hit a point where it really needs to be addressed, and it's been discussed for a lot of years, and you have shovel ready plans. Combined with the increased, as Richmond comes online, the increased traffic in the overall area, I think it's a critical project. And you've also mentioned in terms of the overall Surfside roads, I think that that's why this one has been segmented off, and it doesn't include doing all of Orkawar and Monahans, so that you could do this one road and then have that be able to be used so that in future years when the other roads are improved. I think from an overall public safety perspective, it's extremely important that that project does move forward, and perhaps it will require some advance work heading into town meeting, maybe some pictures of the condition of the road, some explanation. I know the DPW tries to keep up with it, but it does not take much because of the kind of gravel road that it is for it to rapidly deteriorate with absolutely no drainage. So I again appeal to you to please keep that on. Thank you.
Jason?
Yeah, I just want to put a reminder out there for the Capital Program Committee. I think I've been on it for 3.5 years, and it's very easy during those meetings to start to go down the road of, well, this past town meeting, and we always pull back and say that's not our objective. Our objective is to look at the merits of the project. Can it be started in the fiscal year that it's being asked to? Town admin, finance department, everybody vets this before it comes to Capital Program Committee. So they're high priority, but it's because it's vetted. But we understand that it goes to the select board and the FinCom, and then they choose, we choose to put on the ballot or not. And that's understood at Capital Program Committee.
Okay. So, Art kind of got me. I don't know how big of a difference it's going to be taking one item off. I think the Lover's Lane is an incredibly worthy project, and the development at Richmond and the road improvements on Old South, it would just all tie together very nicely. And I don't want to take the ability to vote on it away from the voters. So I'd like to, I think, leave all the ballot questions on, but obviously it takes 4 of us to vote in favor of that. But we also need to decide if we're ready to adopt the warrant. So I'm looking for direction from some of the other board members.
Well, I'll move to adopt the warrant and leave them on.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor by roll call: Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Matt Fay,
Aye.
Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. That carries unanimously.
And I'll just make a quick comment. I hope my concerns are wrong.
Me too. So the warrant and the ballot are set. Do we want to give a reminder of people the dates for the town election to pull papers and so forth? If someone has that handy. If not, we can do it next time. And while Libby, oh, you want to go to that?
I think I got it. Elected position nomination papers are available for pickup as of Monday, March 15th. The last day to obtain and submit them, Tuesday, April 27th.
Thank you. And now we are on to review and amend the select board public comment protocol. I think John Giorgio is going to work through the proposed changes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. As some of you may know, the town administration has been considering bringing some revisions of the town protocol policy back to the board. And this has really been generated by a decision that was rendered in November of 2008 involving the Natick School Committee, where the court found that their public participation policy actually violated some First Amendment rights. And so Libby had asked us to take a...
18, correct?
I'm sorry?
I think you said 2008, but wasn't it 2018?
Yes, 2018, in November 2018, that's correct. So we took a hard look at your policy, and we identified certain vulnerabilities that could potentially result in an issue under the First Amendment. And we also looked at your policy to, for the purpose of recommending some, putting in the policy sort of the way you currently conduct your public participation policy. And so I think it's always a good idea to memorialize that in writing so everyone knows, not just the announcements by the chair at the beginning of each meeting. So the thing to keep in mind is that, well, the open meeting law does not require you to have a public participation policy. Once the board decides to allow that, it becomes what's known as a limited public forum. And it is subject to ensuring that, that your policy does not impinge upon anyone's First Amendment rights. And because you're talking about the First Amendment, your policy is then subject to what's called a strict scrutiny standard, which means that you can still regulate it based upon time, place, and manner, but it has to be narrowly tailored. That is your policy, so that you don't interfere with anyone's First Amendment rights. And the court in the Natick School Committee case said that the select board has a compelling interest in ensuring that the business of the board gets done in a timely and an orderly and efficient fashion. Because obviously you don't want a situation where you spend 2 hours going through public comment and then you don't have time to finish all the business on your agenda. So having said that, there were a few issues as I said, in your current policy, which we thought were problematic. And so we have redrafted that policy, and both your existing policy and our suggested revisions are in your agenda, in your agenda packet at the very end. The primary thing that we addressed, which is different than your current policy, is to make it clear that although the chair of the meeting cannot interrupt speakers who have been recognized to speak, the chair does reserve the right to terminate speech, which is not constitutionally protected because it constitutes true threats, incitement to imminent lawless conduct, comments that were found by a court of law to be defamatory, and or sexually explicit comments made to appeal to prurient interests. So that will be the new standard for you. But I have to caution you that, when you're in a meeting and when people are speaking from the public, it's going to be very difficult to cut them off, even based upon that standard. But it is available to you as a tool should the need arise. We would caution you to only cut off people speaking in the most extreme situation. So the other thing is that the Natick policy includes a limitation on the time that any individual is allowed to speak. And I don't know whether that's been an issue for you, whether you want to include in the policy limitation of perhaps 3 or maybe 5 minutes, which would give the chair the ability to remind people who are speaking that their time is almost up and that they need to wrap it up. We also attempted to memorialize your current practice, which is to have a general public comment period at the beginning, relatively at the beginning of your meeting, for items that are not on your agenda, and that people who wish to comment on specific agenda items are asked to wait until that agenda item comes up. And I know that tonight is a good example of circumstances where you have allowed people to speak multiple times on agenda items, and that has been the basic practice of the board. So that's just being memorialized here. We updated the reference to the open meeting law. We also say in the policy that the purpose of public comment is for the board to listen to individuals who want to speak. It's not a time to engage in a debate between that individual and members of the board. And so our recommendation is that if something is brought to the attention of the board during public comment, which is really the general public comment period at the beginning, the board should really not engage in a debate, but rather the chair can decide whether the public comment is something that warrants an actual discussion by the board. And so she can put it on an agenda for a future meeting. And in that way, it gives town administration the opportunity to have town staff do the due diligence to help you deliberate. It also provides ample notice to the public that this item will in fact be substantively discussed. And so we recommend that you follow through on that practice as reflected in your new policy. So I guess the two questions for the board tonight is, do you want to adopt this new policy? And if so, do you want to place a time limit on speakers?
Melissa?
Thank you so much, Don. Through you, a question for John Giorgio. One, what is a recommended time limit? And two, could it be no more than X number of minutes, something, up to so many minutes, something like that?
Yeah, so in the policy, we have a blank actually. It says, verbal comments may also be curtailed if they exceed blank minutes and to the extent they exceed the scope of the board's authority. So I would say if you want to impose a time limit, it not be less than 3 minutes, but not more than 5. I think somewhere in that range would be a reasonable restriction for the board to place on public comment.
Matt, and then
I support the policy. I suggest 3 minutes. And if someone goes a little over, it's going to take them a while to get them off anyway. But I think I would suggest 3 minutes and support the policy. 3 minutes is a long time. So.
Billy Cassidy has his hand up. Billy, did you want to make a comment? Billy Cassidy?
Don, my apologies. That was a misfire, unintended, and I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. I was kind of wondering what you wanted to say, and I was going to have to keep you to 3 minutes. I am fine with Matt's suggestion. 3 minutes. We could always decide to let it go over if it was something that we needed to hear more of to accomplish what was happening. Christy, then Melissa.
I'm comfortable with the 3 minutes, and I think, like you said, if they need more time, then we can have that warning that it's been 3 minutes, and to try to move it along to another public comment.
Melissa?
Yeah, I was just going to add that, and that it's, I mean, obviously the chair runs the meeting, but it's at the chair's discretion whether or not to allow more time. I think some subjects are more sensitive and may require more time. But
John Giorgio.
So, Madam Chair, I just wanted to add something I forgot to say. So in that sentence, it also says that you can exclude comments that exceed the scope of the board's authority. So I would suggest that you construe that liberally, that it perhaps might be a comment about somebody's concerned about something the DPW is not doing, like plowing roads, and technically that's under the town administration, under the town manager's jurisdiction, but clearly the select board has the supervision and control of the town manager, who's responsible for the operation of department heads. But so you wouldn't want to restrict comments in that regard. But if somebody starts going off about private parties who are not even town employees, that's something you have no control over. And I think you would be within your permissible limits to cut off comments that are not germane to actual town operations and town business.
Thank you, John. Rick Atherton, did you have a comment on this policy?
Excuse me, I do. Sorry, two observations. One, as a member of the board for a number of years, I have always found that public comment is almost always at the discretion and under the control of the chair. And the chair has a responsibility to deal with that in a way that is in the best interest of the town and the community. I'm sort of curious where this came from. It seems awfully not abrupt, but quick. And I'm not sure it's necessary. I think, Dawn, you have the discretion to manage the public comment process appropriately, and changing the sort of regulations relating to that might have consequences that we're all not comfortable with. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. It's actually something we've been discussing for a while at the advisement of council, that we needed to make some revisions in light of things that have been happening in other towns, just to clarify. Melissa?
I was just going to add that I thought council was very clear at the beginning of this that there was that this policy change is necessary because our policy is outdated and out of compliance. So I think policy review is part of our obligation.
Thank you. Does the board want to adopt this policy with a 3-minute limit that can be extended? Should we say something like it can be extended at the discretion of the board or of the chair? Or just leave it?
I would leave it because one of the things you don't want to do is set yourself up for a claim that you're of disparate treatment. I think if you adopted it 3 minutes, though, when you get to 2 minutes and 50 seconds or 2 minutes and 45 seconds, you can say, we have a 3-minute limit. And so please wrap up your comment. You see, at a town meeting, people go over a little bit, but most people will respect the 3-minute limit. If it goes to 3.5, well, that's probably okay. But you just have to ingrain in people the need to be brief, concise, and not repetitive.
Yeah. Christy?
Thank you. In practice, is this something that Erica would keep time of, or Libby, or who would kind of be keeping a timer when people talk?
I would think probably me, but I could be wrong.
Thank you, Erica, for volunteering.
I was going to volunteer Christy. I'll make a motion to approve it
With the 3-minute time limit.
with the 3 minutes. Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor by roll call? Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Melissa Murphy. Melissa Murphy, you're muted. I see you saying aye.
Aye. Yes.
Carantella.
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. The motion carries unanimously. Are there any committee reports this evening? Christy?
I always have committee reports. So we talked about 31 Fairgrounds. That's the big news from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And I know we talked a lot about how great the collaboration was. And I just really wanted to stress how great it was that we were able to do this. And it's not a 40B. We're controlling our development. It's community-wide initiative across many organizations. And I just really wanted to hit that home of how great this collaboration has been. One of the things I wanted to bring up maybe for a future select board meeting item is I was on a call with the Office of Housing and Economic Development, and they were talking about the impact of COVID, especially on unemployment claims, and that 54% of the claims in Massachusetts since last March have been on women. And there's been a lot of discussion on how childcare has been impacting women and they're dropping out of the workforce. And there's been a couple of towns, Eastham is one of them, that put together a kind of COVID relief packages for families, which included housing, education, childcare. There's a few different items in it. And I'm just wondering if there'd be any appetite from our board to, obviously not for this town meeting, but for something in the future or a similar grant program like we just did, or something to go through the Council of Human Services. But I think we've talked a lot about our elder care and elder services, and we circle around child care services, and we never actually have a full board discussion on kind of if we want this to be a policy or not. So I just wanted to bring that to maybe a future board discussion. Thanks.
Thank you, Christy. John Giorgio?
When you have that discussion, I think I might be able to be helpful. I represent Eastham, and also Provincetown did something very similar.
That'd be great to maybe get some more information on those programs, and then we can talk about it at the next agenda meeting, something like that. I think that's really important. I'm actually really glad you raised unemployment. I've been meaning to reach out to our state reps, because I am hearing horror story after horror story about people who have been trying to collect over the last couple of months, and they are just being made to jump through an inordinate amount of hoops to try and get their unemployment. People who've been filing for 6 weeks and still have not received any money. So I don't know what is happening at the state level, if there have been fraud issues or what's going on, but people are literally like starving because they can't get their unemployment. And I don't know if there's anything we can do from a local level.
Madam Chair, I'm not sure either. I don't know if John knows any more about it, but there has been massive fraud. And that's probably why, unfortunately, people
it's really impacting people who aren't doing anything fraudulent.
I know. The bad people are penalizing the good.
Christy?
Just to follow up on that call when they were discussing unemployment, the March to March before COVID, there was 250,000 claims, and the March to so far this week in February, there's been over 3 million. So I think it's also a caseload of the amount of claims that are coming in.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. Brooke Moore, did you want to say something? This isn't really an agenda item, but I'll let you make a brief comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say that I talked to Tom Dixon this week, and they are doing a lot of work on constituent assistance with unemployment claims. So they are open to and really want to receive outreach from people who are struggling with unemployment claims so that they can intervene.
Thank you very much. I'll point some people in that direction.
Yeah, I've done that, and they've helped.
Are there any other committee reports before we get too far off track? Okay. Well, thank you all for wrapping this up at 8:30.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Christy made it. I'll second it.
All right. All those in favor by roll call, Jason Briscoe,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. Motion carries unanimously. We are off next week. I will see you all soon.